Calling all fans of comic book TVs and more, it's the Comic-Con you've been waiting for. Connecticut's #1 Comic-Con, Terrificon, returns to the Mohegan Sun this August 17th to the 19th. Come out and meet your favorite comic book artists and writers in the all-new Mohegan Sun Expo Center, the largest in all New England. Plus, Terrificon has your favorite movie and TV stars like Lou Ferrigno, Henry Winkler, Ralph Macchio, and many more, all at Terrificon. It's more than just a Comic-Con. It's a Terrificon with cosplay, live music, panels, and more, all at Terrificon at Mohegan Sun. It's 3 full days of Comic-Con action only at Terrificon this August 17th to the 19th. Remember, all kids 10 and under get in free with a paying adult. There's a lot of Comic-Cons out there, but there's only one Terrificon. Be there on August 17th to the 19th for Connecticut's #1 Comic-Con only at the Mohegan Sun. For more information, visit us at www.terrificon.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Man, 2 great conversations for you to get you excited for Terrificon, which is coming next month at Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. August 17th is when it starts. I know you've heard the advertisements on here. I'm going to be doing a lot more Terrificon guest interviews because they've got a great group of people, both classic legendary creators and a lot of great current creators as well, as reflected on today's Word Balloon. We're going to start things off with Rascally Roy himself, the legend, Roy Thomas. Really excited about this conversation. I've been wanting to do it really since the start of Word Balloon. And Roy's such a busy guy working on Alter Ego magazine and a lot of other things that he's been writing. We talk a bit about that in the conversation. And in the past, I've emailed him, and he's like, well, I can give you, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. And my thought was, I can't. It's Roy Thomas. My God. The guy's been writing comics for decades. He's covered every character in the Marvel Universe and a good number of the DC Universe characters as well. I can't do it. So I would turn him down and be like, no, not enough time. And then John Cimino, who you might know in toy circles as Stretchy Hulk Guy. He was one of the guys behind Terrificon, and he helps Roy out and is his front man. And I talked to him, and we arranged this conversation. We were only going to talk for a half hour, and thankfully I think Roy got going and maybe enjoyed the conversation enough that we were able to continue talking for a good hour. And really excited to give it to you today. It's kind of my greatest hits requests. I mean, there's not a lot of Conan talk. There's not a lot of Avengers talk. There's a little bit in there. But I really was interested in Roy's World War II comics. Things like the iNvaders and the All Star Squadron. They're among my favorite Roy Thomas books. So I really wanted to focus on that. But of course, within the conversation, we couldn't help but mention his role in the development of Wolverine. And a lot of other great subjects. Conan does come up, the Avengers. We talk a little bit about the current Marvel movies. So it's a great conversation with Roy. And certainly we talk about Alter Ego, his magazine that he's been editing since its inception. And he and his staff are continuing to bring the Silver and Golden Age alive with great interviews with living creators and their children in some cases. And man, I'm excited for some of the stuff that's coming up in Alter Ego. So Roy Thomas for part 1 of today's Word Balloon. Part 2, another guy I've been meaning to have on for years, and that is one of the best Spider-Man artists that has come along in the last 20 years, and that's Ryan Stegman. I'm telling you, man, Ryan always gives his best work. He has been incredible at Marvel, both on Spider-Man and satellite Spider-Man titles. He's currently working with Donny Cates on Venom. In fact, their latest issue just came out this week, and it's a great chance to catch up with Ryan, a guy that I've, met a few years ago, and we'd have conversations at conventions in the past, and always meant to have him on, as I say in the interview. And then you look up and realize that it's been 3 years since we've, planned on having a conversation. So finally, Ryan Stegman on today's Word Balloon. I think you're going to enjoy it. It's brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you, League, for your support, subscribing through Patreon, and also just anecdotally sending me emails and tweet messages and saying how much you like the show through Facebook as well. It really means a lot, and I appreciate that you appreciate what I'm trying to do here. Just trying to bring you the best conversation in comics I can possibly do. And, again, today I think is a great example of that. If you like what you hear at Word Balloon and think it helps you enrich your love of the comic book world and the geek culture world, and you want to help me out, if you want to help by subscribing via Patreon, that's great. Word Balloon is free. It'll always be free. But if you can help the cause out, is it worth $1 a month? Is it worth $3, the price of a comic book a month? You know, again, I think I give you hours of enjoyment here at Word Balloon, and if you want to help the cause out, you can help by subscribing to Word Balloon via Patreon. Go to patreon.com/wordballoon, or you can click on the front page Patreon ad at wordballoon.com. But thank you very much for your continued support, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by In Stock Trades. Because of his body of work, InStockTrades.com is the perfect place to shop for Roy Thomas product, man. I am telling you. Among them, you can get the Avengers Legion of Unliving, a great collection of Avengers stories back from the 70s. Roy and his wife, Dan Thomas, also Steve Englehart in this collection, Tom DeFalco, Kurt Busiek. It's 42% off. $17.39. You can also get Black Bolt, Something Unhuman This Way Comes. This is Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway with great art from Neil Adams and Mike Sikowski. 42% off for this collection. It's just $4.63. There is a ton of Conan the Barbarian product from Roy that's available. Chronicles of Conan, trade paperback volume 15. This is got Roy stuff in there and John Buscema art, Neil Adams, among Ernie Chan, among the great artists. 42% off, $9.83. Or you can get volume 16, The Eternity War and Other Stories. And again, this is Roy Thomas and also J.M. DeMatteis doing the writing. John Buscema and Ernie Chan doing the art. This one is 42% off, $9.83. Lots of Conan, lots of other great Marvel works as well. Also things like Roy's amazing work in Alter Ego, doing some tremendous behind-the-scenes interviews on the Justice Society run from 1940 to 1951. And also even the Seven Soldiers of Victory. That's all covered in the All-Star Companion Volume 3 trade paperback from Tomorrow's, all written by Roy Thomas. 40% off, $16.17. Just some of the great books that are available now at InStockTrades.com with Roy Thomas's name on them. Hey, don't take my word for it. Go to the website. You're going to find great books at great prices. Don't forget your orders for $50 or more. Receive free shipping from our friends at InStockTrades.com. All right, without further ado, let's get into our conversation now with Roy Thomas, Rascally Roy himself, on Word Balloon. Roy Thomas, welcome to Word Balloon. It's a pleasure to have you on, sir.
Great. Well, I'm happy to be here, wherever here is.
Well, I'm in Chicago, but, you know, we do pretty good.
Okay,
we're a worldwide audience. So
we're together in cyberspace, you know.
Exactly. Well, you know.
Which looks a little like, I guess, where the Ant-Man and the Wasp were in that recent movie.
I haven't had a chance I'm embarrassed to say I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. Have you seen it?
Yeah, it's all right, although I don't know why we knew two Ant-Men and two Wasps, but other than that, it's a nice visual treat.
Well, as someone who's written big Avenger epics, I should ask you what you thought of Infinity War.
Well, it's a big visual epic. I've never been as big on the super cosmic thing that Jim Starlin, who's, you know, certainly a friend and a very talented, you know, guy, has always been into with his Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War, etc. That was never. I mean, I did a couple of those, the Kree-Skrull War and so forth, but I was never as big on the cosmic war kind of scale. So in some ways, that wasn't my kind of movie. But I have to say, you know, it definitely looks like a Marvel comic, of, you know, not just a Starlin comic, but, you know, a big giant crossover with a lot of stuff happening. And so in many ways, it was perhaps the almost the closest equivalent so far to an actual, you know, classic Marvel comic, at least one of, you know, a few decades ago during the classic period.
I would agree.
And, you know, so that's kind of good. I'm looking forward to seeing the second part. And of course, you know, my main concern is that they bring the Vision back to life. That's about all I really care. They can kill off anybody else, but just keep the Vision around.
I hear you, man. No, and I really appreciated. You know, in fact, your story of the Vision, when they collected it in the Treasury edition, was literally one of the first Avenger stories I ever read. And
which one? You mean the very first one?
Yeah,
Avengers 57. Yeah.
Well, and of course, even a Vision can cry, or even an android could cry.
Yeah, that was the next issue. Yeah, it was really a sort of a two-part story in a sense.
Yeah, that was amazing. And yeah, I mean, again, they put it in one of those giant-sized treasury editions. That's the first time I read it. So that was my first exposure to the Vision and Yellow Jacket and Black Panther and all these characters that maybe Marvel fans take for granted. And it was very exciting for this 9-year-old when I read it.
Well, they all had to start. They all had to start somewhere. I mean, there was a day when I first walked into a store and saw Superman or Batman for the first time as a kid, or the Flash as a teenager, or Fantastic Four #1 as a just graduated college student. I mean, there's always a first for something, whether it's the original comic or whether it's a reprint, 5 years later or a half a century later. So every comic that comes out, somebody's seeing it for the first time.
Well, I know next month at Terrificon, you're doing a panel with Jim Starlin to talk about Marvel Cosmic, and you'll be talking about the Kree Skull War, and I have the pleasure of moderating that panel, so I'm excited to do that.
Oh, you do? Well, okay.
But for
we'll hopefully show up and and everything. Yeah, I saw at another convention. I guess it was the New Jersey convention. I as a matter of fact, Mitch Halleck had arranged for us all to go, but I had trouble appreciating it the first time I saw it because we were in the second row or something, and it was 3D, and I have an eye that's kind of, my right eye's kind of gone bad on me, so I really, I don't know, I don't get as much out of 3D, and especially not from the second row looking up, it's sort of all lost. So I had trouble just kind of watching the picture that night, because I had to go see it a second time in order to kind of appreciate it.
Oh, was that for Infinity War? Was that the plan?
Yeah, Infinity War, yeah.
Got it, okay. Well,
when it first, come out, that was just like first or second day it had come out, yeah.
I understand. Well, with our limited time, I wanted to focus on one thing of yours that I loved, and I don't hear you talk about it enough, and that's the Invaders, because I was such a fan of your run on the Invaders, and even when you came back to it a couple times in the 90s and such. I'm really interested. Was it hard to convince Marvel to do a book that reflected on their golden age? I mean, did you have to be at a place of power to get that book greenlit? Can you tell us how the...
Well, it was really more that I was leaving a place of power. What happened is that I had just stepped down as the editor-in-chief in '74. I was just in the process of leaving that job. Stan and I had, really more because of other people than because of ourselves, had kind of come to an impasse where it just made more sense for me to leave the job than to stay. Stan was being caught in between me and the president of the company, who didn't like me because he felt I was too much on the side of the artists, the writers, and not always a company man and that kind of thing. Maybe he was right. So anyway, I was leaving, and when I was leaving, I needed to get myself some assignment because I was getting a contract in order to, like, one of the first contracts, maybe below the level of Stan that Marvel had given out, to write and be the editor of my own material, not subject to the new editor-in-chief, but only to Stan. And so I wanted a couple of new books, and I wanted to get them outside the Marvel mainstream, partly because I was, I'd written all those characters at one time or the other just about,
sure.
And partly because I didn't want to have to coordinate a lot of stuff with other writers and artists, I just felt like I just wanted my own little corner. I already had that to some extent with the very popular Conan books.
You bet.
There were two of those, and they were some of the big money makers in the at Marvel at the time. But I wanted to get one or two more titles that would be, outside that mainstream. No coordination, no reason to ask another writer or another editor, what I could do with the characters. So I figured if I did stories set in World War II, with Captain America, Human Torch, and Submariner, I wouldn't have to coordinate with anybody because, nobody could say, well, I'm using Captain America that month, so you can't use him, or I'm using this or that guy, because they weren't using him in 1941, 42, which is when the book was set.
Sure.
And the other thing I did was I sort of assaulted the earth there a little bit by Stan had this idea back about 68, right before all the characters got their own titles, when the anthology characters all got their own titles.
Mm-hmm.
He had this idea after the success of this one issue with the Hulk and Submariner fighting for the whole issue of Tales to Astonish. He'd had the idea for a while of teaming up the Hulk and the Submariner as a team and calling them the Invaders. And he quickly forgot about it, decided, it really wouldn't work, keep doing it month after month. But I remember that he liked that title. Of course, in between there had been this TV show, but that only lasted one season, and nobody really remembered it that well. So when I told Stan this idea about, I said it's gonna have Captain America, one of the big characters, plus the Human Torch and Submariner, and we'll have other characters in, and it'll just be stories set in World War II, sort of like the ones he and Jack had done with Captain America a few years earlier.
Sure.
And I said, I've got a great title. I said, it's The Invaders. And Stan said, I like that name. Not remembering it was one that he had proposed for a series years earlier, and I didn't remind him. So, by the time I walked out of the room, I had a new bi-monthly, title to do, and that was the reason I did it. I was interested in World War II, and, I'd written Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos,
sure.
and I was very interested in the home front of World War II, and I was fascinated by comics history and the fact that the superheroes had all kind of started right before or during World War II. All the great superheroes, the Marvel ones, the DC ones, the Fawcett ones like Captain Marvel, and all the others, they almost all came to fruition during that period from the late 30s through the mid 40s. And so I thought, well, this would be their heyday in a way, and be a great excuse to write new adventures of them, such as should have been done by Timely back in the 40s, but they never really had those characters to get together much after the initial Torch and Namor fights. They never really, they had 2 issues after the war with those characters together in the All-Winter Squad, but it was only when they were already, past their prime and beginning almost to die out.
Yeah.
And nobody saw them. I don't even know if as a kid I saw them, but I bought almost everything of that sort. But so I figured this way I could finally do that kind of book and have a lot of fun with it. And I wasn't under the assumption that it would be necessarily one of Marvel's, big sellers, but we did okay for a while with it.
Well, I'll tell you, it was literally one of my favorite books that you were putting out, and I absolutely love the idea of these backstories. I think because I grew up with those 100-page spectaculars where they were reprinting all the Justice Society stories in the JSA. And like you said, I was surprised that Timely never made that move, or even with the success in the 60s of the Justice League. And granted, we had the Avengers and everything, but with Gardner Fox, doing the crossovers and stuff with the JSA, that it never occurred to Stan and the Marvel team that they wouldn't mind that
or
stuff.
To DC, DC never did either until I got there in 1980.
Well, that's right, with All Star Squadron. Yes,
I was a one-man cheerleader for World War II stories, I guess.
So
I can understand why. I mean, it was already several decades in the past, and American readers don't have a real great interest in history. But I figured, well, this was still the era where the great heroes, the Red Skull, and Adolf Hitler. I mean, what's not to like about that?
And also the great costume designs, both the Timely heroes and the DC heroes as well, the national heroes. Because I mean, even Captain America knockoffs like the Patriot. When I saw him in your Liberty Legion stories, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting character. And well, first of all, I wanted to ask regarding the Invaders, working with Frank Robbins, and I was one of those kids that I have to say, at first I'm like, oh man, what an ugly style. But then it was compelling. Well, but as I've matured and read things like his great comic strip, Johnny Hazard, I'm like, oh, this guy's a genius. And I have a great regard now for his art, no matter what.
Yeah, but the problem is, the people who are deciding whether comic books lived or died were more like you as a kid than you as an adult. I was very happy in some ways to get him. He was somebody else's suggestion, but it made sense to me. He had just sort of come over, from working at DC, I guess, and I liked his work, what little I'd seen of it. And John Romita, the art director, was a big fan of his, because Romita was a big fan of Milt Kniff, so naturally he was a big fan of, and he really admired Robbins. The one thing that was a problem with Frank was great. He was a great storyteller. He was wonderful with the details of World War II because, of course, he had lived through, that era, and he would toss things in that, a younger artist wouldn't have thought of without me directing him. He would just toss a lot of stuff in, the nice touches, just wonderful, and the storytelling was great. But he had one problem, and that is that he had a drawing style based on a kind of his own particular version of Milt Kniff and the Luther style that somehow didn't really mesh with the kind of Kirby-inspired, storytelling which Marvel was doing. John Romita was an example of the absolute perfect blend, and had been since the 1950s when he did Captain America, of the Milt Caniff school with the Jack Kirby school. You look at that, you can see equal parts of those two artists in the wonderful work he did back in the 50s, which is my favorite of his work. Frank admired Caniff, but to him, the Kirby-type stuff, that was just bad drawing, I think. And so when he would draw this stuff, the figures tended to look too rubbery or floating in the air, and didn't have the, didn't have the right feel somehow. What I did, which was both sacrilegious to some and at the same time successful, was to have it inked by Vinnie Coletta, who had been the inker of Thor, quite popular, and who had a lot of faults, including not always inking everything that was on the page, etc., and doing it at a rapid pace. But the readers really liked his work. He kind of noodled it up, and somehow he and Frank together, the book sold really well for that first 7 or so issues that he was inking it. Now, I won't say that it's necessarily because of this, but the very first issue, that about number 8 or 9, that Vinny left because he became an assistant art director or something at DC. The very first issue after he left, I had the very talented Frank Springer ink the book, and he made it look much, much more like real Frank Robbins, and the sales dropped. And never really recovered from that.
Wow.
We went along for a while and we got to 40 or 50 issues and could have gone on. I think if it hadn't been for Jim Shooter kind of, just being as happy to see books I had fail, I think that the book could have easily gone on. I think there were other things in play besides just sales figure, though it certainly wasn't a big seller. But in its later years when it was finally dropped, and I screwed up a little bit by not writing all the stuff myself. My friend Don Glute did a good job on some things, but I should have watched over it myself and not given out the writing to anybody else, except that I had just moved about that time to Los Angeles, and, it was a different life. I was doing a little bit of work in other fields and, dating again after my, divorce and everything. So, somehow comic books weren't really quite center, front, and foremost in my mind as they'd once did. So I was very happy to have somebody else write some stories, that I could just edit. And that, probably wasn't the best for the Invaders, despite the good work that Don did. So there were just a lot of different things. But it is funny, that book sold as long as, I don't know if it's magic or what, but as long as Vinny inked it, it sold. And as soon as Vinny left it, it stopped selling. That's
pretty cool. And I'm glad to hear, because I've certainly heard both sides of the argument about Vinny Coletta. And it's part of, that's what makes comics fascinating. And he's certainly a character. And I have appreciated the anecdotes and hearing an advocate in terms of Vinny's style, because he is kind of notorious for
I like the style. He's the kind of guy who could have been a really good inker if he took a little more time, but that wasn't his his style. His idea was, he was fairly good. I mean, Stan liked his style and had a personal relationship with Vinny to some extent. The readers liked his style. His Thor inking was quite popular. There wasn't any rank and hue and cry again, from the readers against Vinny Coletta. That was all either in the professionals themselves or maybe a few older readers who noticed that the Kirby stuff maybe looked like it had been simplified a little bit. But the fact remains, from the point of view of just seeing what came out on the page, his Thor stuff holds up very well. No, it's not Fantastic Four inked by Joe Sinnott, but it beats the hell to me out of Fantastic Four inked by 2 or 3 other people that had inked the book in the past.
Understood. And also, I always felt he drew beautiful women or inked beautiful women, and
that was his specialty. He was a romance artist, and he could actually draw when he wanted to. He just preferred to wheel and deal rather than actually work. He had his other things. He had his photographer studio with all the nude models, a few blocks away from Marvel, where he would invite me or whoever happened to be the editor-in-chief of the week, and stuff like that. And, he preferred not to get by on talent, even though I think he had plenty of it.
Interesting. Very interesting. Your What If story, which I thought was such a marvelous solution to what does the Marvel Universe do when Captain America goes missing, and what the United States does. And I'll tell you, I love that story, and I'm so happy that it's been kind of shoehorned into continuity now. I think Brubaker and
I had mentioned at the time that that even though this was a comic called What If, that this actually was a story in continuity. I've been pleased to see that it's been kind of, left that way.
Absolutely.
It was intended from the get-go that even though this was a breach of the format of the book or its purpose, that it was still one I wanted to do. Since I was the editor and Stan didn't say no because I didn't ask him, it just got by the way it was. What happened is that when I'd been the editor, I had assigned Steve Englehart and asked him to take care of this matter with, what happened to the Captain America that, after 1945 when there were still adventures from 45 to 49 and plus the return in the 50s.
Yes.
And Steve did a wonderful, storyline there, and everything, except for one thing. Everything he did was fine, but he didn't really take care of the whole period. He didn't handle, he sort of had that 50s Captain America like he went crazy or something like this.
Right.
I forget all the details.
Yeah.
But anyway, he didn't take care of that whole period of who had been, of who had been the Captain America in the 40s, and then did he come back in the 50s? Was it somebody else or whatever it was? So I decided that since he had done a fine story, but it didn't cover all the bases I wanted, I would just take care of the rest of it myself in that one What If, and have a kind of a fun story itself. Since there had been 2 issues of All Winners Squad with number 19 and 21, I kind of acted like this, in a sense, was the missing All Winners number 20.
It was great, man.
Although I guess actually it took place maybe before. I forget. But anyway,
I know what you mean.
I forget all these details after all these years. It's been what, 40 years or so since and more since the Invaders.
That's true, and the what ifs as well. Man, great what if stories. And also, did you write that second one as well, where Bucky lived and Bucky took over the mantle and Steve became, kind of the Nick
I think
Fury
that
of
was
Shield?
sort of my idea. I think I didn't write it. That might have been why I gave Don or something to write.
Okay,
I had a number of I was going to write every issue myself, but I got kind of disgusted because without telling me, they back at the office, and for no particular reason, I wasn't late or behind or anything. They stuck in what is probably a good issue, issue number 3, that they had Jim Shooter write about the Avengers and everything. But I was annoyed because, they just stuck it in without telling me in a book that I had created. And so I decided, the hell with them. So after that, I just didn't bother writing every issue, and I decided to, and within about a year, I got off it and, and just let other people take it over. I had thought I wanted to write every issue, but then I decided, once I saw one issue come out that I didn't do, it made me think, well, if I didn't do that issue, I don't care if I do the rest of them either. So I just did the ones I liked after that. I did the Invaders. I did the Conan one.
Yes, which is fantastic. Conan in the Modern World.
I kind of wish I had done myself. Again, Don Glut did a fine job. I wish I had done that one about the 1950s Avengers myself. That was an idea of mine, and I would have done it just a little differently, but Don did a good job with it. But it's one that having been a kid myself in the 50s too, as Don was, I think I would have had I would have, had a different take on it and so forth. But that's, it turned out okay, and the book had a lot of good moments, and they keep bringing it back, so it was kind of a nice. See, that was another idea like the Invaders that I made up at the time of leaving, in order to give myself a book where I didn't have to check with anybody else. Because if I'm doing a what if story, again, nobody can say I need to check with a Spider-Man writer or the Fantastic Four editor to use the characters, because this is a what if story anyway. So it was just an attempt of mine to avoid the whole problem of continuity.
Well, and
even though, of course, I'm the continuity kid, but I wanted to avoid it with. But I just didn't want to have to. I liked the other editors, Marv Wolfman, Len Wein, Jerry Conway. They're all Archie Goodwin, all friends of mine. But I just didn't want to have to deal with them or with the other writers. I wanted to, especially after I got to California, I just wanted to go off in my own corner and write, and the heck with them all,
Well, sure. And I know that I in another conversation, I'd love to hear more about your complicated.
If you need a little more time, I mentioned the half hour just in case we needed to. But if you need another 15, 20 minutes, we can talk.
Man.
I don't want to. Yeah,
I appreciate that.
I felt bad making it short and and everything.
And truly, Roy, I appreciate you saying that. And also, I know that again, I know how busy you are, so I do appreciate that. Well, we'll keep going now. I also wondered if What If obviously was inspired by those great '60s imaginary stories that DC was doing as well.
To some extent, they were. Of course, my first job, was as the assistant editor to Mort Weisinger on Superman at the time they were doing those stories.
Sure.
I sort of always, I liked the idea and some of the stories. I mean, I didn't read Superman regularly, but I sort of liked the idea. But the idea of an imaginary story is sort of to say, it didn't happen. And since I did like the idea of parallel worlds, Stan didn't particularly, but I did. So I figured, well, if I have the Watcher introduce these stories and say they're happening like on parallel worlds, it made them not imaginary stories. They were stories of an alternative world. And I'd already, done that with the Squadron Sinister and Squadron Supreme in Avengers. Sure. So I'd already kind of introduced that into Marvel, Marvel's version of Earth 2 at the time, I suppose. And so I just carried it on in this particular case.
And I loved in that first issue of What If, when Spider-Man joins the Fantastic Four, when the Watcher, and you just have glimpses of, on this world, Killraven, this is happening, and on various other worlds, and certainly the Squadron Supreme was one of those.
There was even
worlds.
a hint of the Superman Spider-Man story, even though you couldn't show Superman, just his fist.
I forgot about that.
Or maybe you missed that.
That's excellent. No, I got to go back and look at that. That's fantastic.
Oh yeah, there's a fist hitting the air around Spider-Man, which is taken from the, that first tabloid and everything, and. I couldn't mention Superman's name, so I had to be kind of coy about it. But yeah, I wanted to mention all these because obviously, I had made up the concept for the War of the Worlds series, even though I never ended up writing it. And again, I felt like this is another parallel Earth version of of the world. So this was a good way to just be able to do anything we wanted to. Starting with the idea of what if in that famous little incident, in in Spider-Man?
Yes.
What if Spider-Man really had joined the Fantastic Four, and then what if this happened? What if that happened? And except for that Invaders story, they were all parallel world stories. That the only one that wasn't, I guess, was What If number 4. And
when that would be the Captain America.
The Invaders,
yeah. The Invaders
if I've got the number right.
I think you're right. They're great, and I'm glad you mentioned that you conceived Killraven, because I appreciated a lot of that 70s output from Marvel, where clearly you were tapping pulps and concepts beyond traditional superheroes and bringing back old ideas, but kind of modernizing them for the comic book world. And certainly Iron Fist fits in that world as well. I was a big Lost Horizon fan, and I certainly recognized the.
Yeah, I've never read the book. I saw the movie.
Sure, me too, man.
and of course, we were actually taking it not directly even from Lost Horizon movie or book, but from the comic book version that Bill Everett had swiped of it in 1939, the Amazing Man character, which Gil Kane was a big fan of. So when I told him about this character I wanted to do called Iron Fist and so forth, he immediately came up with this idea. Let's swipe a lot of stuff, from the Amazing Man book I always loved. And
wow.
I was only, I was less familiar with it. I had seen it, but, I didn't know the copy of it. And so he told me what the story was, and we just made that the plot,
Absolutely, man. Well,
with the blessing of, Bill Everett had always said we could do something with Amazing Man if we wanted to. That's why we ended up doing that. And then later, when I went to D.C., I actually made up a character called Amazing Man. I knew Stan wouldn't like that name at Marvel, but once I was, doing All Star Squadron at D.C., I could actually use that name that at Marvel Stan would have said was way too carny,
Very interesting. Well, and let's talk a little bit about All Star Squadron and you coming over to D.C. First of all, the jump to D.C., was it because you weren't getting along with Shooter?
Yeah.
That simple. Okay. And
it's that simple.
Okay. Well, go on.
I just felt he lied to me in some negotiations and so forth, and we could have parted, in a more friendly term. But after what I felt were lies or at least deliberate misinformation, I really didn't intend to deal with him anymore. And I had a long-standing offer from DC, so I decided to take it. I didn't have any great desire to work for DC, but it did. It would be a kick, I felt, to get to, play around with the Justice Society, which sort of made it worthwhile.
Did they offer that to you, or did you pitch that to them?
No, they sort of wanted me to when I came over. They had a Justice Society series that had ended up in Adventure Comics and only been canceled about a year before,
yes.
Which is why which is why they were amenable to the idea that instead of just bringing back the Justice Society only about a year after it had gone under, they were amenable to my doing this World War II group, I was aware again that probably wouldn't sell as well as a modern day, but by that stage, I got to admit, I had very little interest in comic book sales, except obviously you had to sell enough copies to keep the editors and everybody off your back, and eventually I didn't, but I did for a long time.
Well, because it was such a great series, man, and again, I enjoyed that.
That doesn't necessarily mean they'll sell. There's a lot of good series that don't sell at all.
No, you're right, and it's still happening today. You're 100% right.
Yeah.
But no, I enjoyed again, because of, I think, reading those reprints, loved that Adventure Comics and All Star Comics run. I talked to Keith Giffen about that in the past and how much they made Superman look like that classic Joe Shuster look and everything. That was really great. But then, to go back to World War...
Wally Wood had done that back when he was working with Paul Levitz on the book. He had done that one or two issues, too. I think that was one of the first times that was done consciously and everything. And I just like to play around with these things and, kind of ignore the... and again, it was a way of keeping out of DC continuity, too. Once again, I just as soon be off in my own little world as much as possible at DC and not have to interact with the other... writers and editors. I felt, my feeling was I'd worked with what I felt was the best editor in comics at the time, and for quite a few years, Stan Lee, much as I liked Julie Schwartz and other, editors and respected what they did. So I really wasn't that wild about knuckling under to a bunch of guys who I felt, didn't know nearly as much as my last boss or as much as necessarily what he had taught me. So I figured I'll just go and do my own thing, and as long as that worked for me, it did. And when eventually that stopped selling enough books, well, then I had to figure out, another way to make a living,
Sure, absolutely. Now, I know your former wife, Dan, she co-wrote All Star Squadron.
It's not my former wife. She's my wife now.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yeah. I beg your pardon.
Yeah, it's my wife, my first wife, Jean, who had written things like Night Nurse and Spidey Super Stories. Yeah, Dan and I worked together, a little at Marvel. She helped me with a couple of plots, but mostly when I went to D.C., I got her involved and everything. And she worked with me for several years there. And when I went back to Marvel, less so, though we still have a lot of credits at Marvel together based on plotting together.
That's cool. Well, I'm glad you guys are together, too, because I thought, you guys were a great writing team. And I wondered, what would you say, could you quantify what her contributions were to writing All-Star Squadron?
Well, it depended. It depended. In some cases, we plotted them together. And there was sometimes her idea, sometimes mine, or I had a little idea, and she would flesh it out. And sometimes she would bring things, that, I wouldn't have thought of because I'd been engrossed in the comics thing so much. But in some of the books, especially at DC, not at Marvel ever, but at DC, she was often the writer of the first draft of the dialogue, too, especially on books like, I know, quite a few issues of Infinity Incorporated she did the first draft of. And then we did that 4-issue series, Johnny Thunder, a.k.a. Thunderbolt.
Yes.
She did the first draft, and as a matter of fact, that book is pretty close. I mean, it was more like I did some editing of her rather than co-writing it. Really.
I see. Okay.
So it varied. It varied, and on other books like All Star Squadron and Arak, we sort of co-plotted, and Arak was originally really based on an idea of hers, really not mine.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that. Well,
we were talking about doing something. They wanted some kind of Conan type character from me at DC, and I had thought about getting another Howard character, or making up a character like that. And Dan came up with this kind of weird idea about what if an American Indian discovered Europe, and from that came eventually Arak, Son of Thunder.
Oh, really cool, man. Yeah. That's amazing at first. And now, you see the title and you don't know how to pronounce it. But now that you say it, I know exactly what, because at first I'm like, I don't know if
a lot of people couldn't pronounce Conan for years. Some people would pronounce it Conan. I'd hear people, say, or,
sure.
Red Sanja. I mean, I don't care. As long as they buy it, they can pronounce it however they wanted to. I grew up my entire childhood the first time around reading about a character I thought was named the Submariner, because I never heard the word pronounced by anybody, and also thinking that the whole time, I think, since I never saw the movie serial at the time, all the way through his end in 1953, I thought that Captain Marvel's magic word, I pronounced it Shazam. I never said Shazam.
Oh, interesting.
Even though now I see that's a more obvious pronunciation. But I always pronounced it Shazam, for the entire 6 or 7 years that I was, reading that comic the first time through. It didn't matter as long as I put my dime down. They didn't care.
I remember your reboot of Shazam, and have to ask what you thought of the trailer that they just dropped this week.
I haven't seen the trailer.
Okay.
Of the new movie. It looks like they're trying to find ways to bring what they can of the original character back. Even though they've had to make some changes.
I think you'll be pleased because they keep a lot of, without spoiling it for you, they keep a lot of the classic tropes, and it feels like Big, the Tom Hanks movie, applied to a superhero story, which is a great idea.
Which is kind of funny because I started doing that back when whenever I started handling the character back in stories like Secret Origins, where I think one of the first times that that had been done with the idea that he kept the young mind when he had Captain Marvel's body was maybe when Jerry Bingham and I did the retelling of the first Captain Marvel story in one of the early issues of Secret Origins, and then Dan and I together did a 4-issue series on Shazam: The New Beginning, with a 30th edition of a 30th anniversary edition which just came out, and we did it there. So I don't know if we had Big in mind particularly, but I don't think you'll find that in a Captain Marvel story before we did it. But I think that's a good approach at this particular stage to make the character different. Otherwise, if he's a different character, it's more like my version of Captain Marvel at Marvel, where they're two different people, and that may have worked in a certain way back in the 40s. I don't think it would work as well now. But I do know that Mike Uslan, whose dream it's been to get the Shazam series into a movie, I know he's a fan of the original character, so I knew he'd want to do right by it if he could.
I really enjoyed when Rick Jones was tied to Marvel and the way you set things up. I thought that was a great homage, but also a very modern take on two different characters occupying the same space like that. It was pretty neat, and I always enjoyed Rick Jones in the Negative Zone.
Yeah, well, it was just an attempt to kind of save a book that was kind of going nowhere. It was a character Stan hadn't really wanted to do, and I gave him a bad color scheme and everything, so I figured it was my job to try to save it. And I suddenly came up with the idea at home one morning, and I called Stan and told him I got this idea of what's something to do with Captain Marvel, but I'll only do it if you give the book to me and have me write it, and I guess he could have ordered me, not to, but he said okay, and so I got it, and at that same time, by sheer coincidence, Gil Kane came in and said he'd like to do Captain Marvel, just not knowing what was going on with it. So we yanked the plot back from the artist who had it, gave him something else, and Gil and I worked together for the first time on it, and we really had a good time, and we worked together a lot after that.
And honestly, what a great opportunity for you when you came along that you were able to work with some of these great artists and stuff, and I it's great that you straddle these different generations with the
I'm really happy to do that. I feel I was very lucky to have come along at the time when I could still. I was thinking about this morning, except for maybe on Wonder Woman, I did meet at least one or more of the creators of most of the major characters. Even Bob Kane, I exchanged a couple of sentences with once, and I was probably lucky that was about it. But I got to know Siegel and Schuster and spend a little time with them, and Bill Everett was sort of a roommate off and on for 2 or 3 years, and I got to know Martin Odell and Dun Green and Harry Lampert of the Flash and Gardner Fox and all these guys. It was nice.
Absolutely, man. No, and obviously with Ditko's passing, I should ask you if you've got any good Steve Ditko stories.
Well, none I haven't already told because there weren't that many. It's just he was just an odd character. He had his own way about him, and some days I think what a great figure of integrity, the way he turned down money, and then sometimes I think, boy, what an idiot for turning down all that money, and everything. But I guess they're probably both true. But he was a great talent.
Absolutely. My God, yes.
So I know that they're going to kill me, though, if we don't talk a little about the Terrificon. You think we should mention it at all?
Sure.
Or?
No, and, believe me, I'm going to... Well, my intent was to cover that in the intro and the outro and everything, so believe me. No, I got Mitch's back. He's got my back as well.
All right. Well, because they'll have your back with a knife if you don't mention it, I guess.
No, I'm really... and like I said, if you want, we can wrap up, Ray. I don't want to hurt you.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. But I just wanted to make sure we didn't forget that, because it's coming up. I have to go to Honolulu next weekend.
Sorry.
But then 2 weeks after that is, sorry about that. Well, I'll never get outside the hotel. I've been there before. I'm just going for the 2 days. I'll be inside signing comics the whole time.
Oh, man, I hear you. But, yeah, jeez.
I'm just going for the money, But, no, I like Hawaii. I was there, years ago for a couple of weeks with Dan and my mother. So, but, I won't have time to do much. So I'm just happy. I'll just sign stuff and then hop on a plane and come home. But I enjoyed the Terrificon because it's such an unusual setting, being in a casino, even though I don't really, gamble. But it's still a nice setting to kind of wander around in. It's different from the usual comic book convention.
I'm absolutely looking forward to it, and I'm moderating a bunch of panels for Mitch.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess we're doing two. We're going to do the Marvel Cosmic and also the Wolverine panel that you're going to do with the psychologist that wrote that interesting book about Wolverine.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. I just go wherever they tell me to. It's Wolverine. It's kind of funny after having the idea for Wolverine, I never really thought about it much, and then it occurred to me, well, I ought to occasionally mention to people that I co-created the character. I mean, I got nothing but respect for what Len Wein and others did with it, but the fact remains it was my idea, so I thought, I may as well mention it occasionally. It is, after all, the most famous character that I ever came up with the idea for.
Yeah, please tell us about your contribution to creating Wolverine.
Yeah, well, it was really because of Canada. I felt like, it just occurred to me, this is near the end of my time as being editor-in-chief, but, I knew we had a lot of Canadian readers, I don't know, 5 or 10% maybe, or several percent at least of our readers were Canadian, not even counting the Canadians living in the United States or somewhere that might buy one. And we didn't have a single Canadian, character. And I thought, I didn't even know if there were any anywhere in comics, and I thought, we ought to have one. So I started thinking, I thought, well, an animal title. I didn't want a Captain Canuck, kind of title.
Sure.
So I decided that an animal would be good. We always had animals and things like this, and I thought, you can't have a moose. There's already one in Archie, and that's too dramatic. And I came up with, as it turned out, Dave Cockrum had showed me a character he'd made up called Wolverine later, and I think he brought some elements into it later when he was drawing it, but they didn't have anything to do with the character. What it is I started thinking of animals, and I came up with two. And obviously, if Dave had been the influence, I wouldn't have had two. One was Wolverine, and the other was a badger, and because both are very fierce creatures.
Sure.
And the Wolverine, in particular, of course, is a small creature noted for taking on animals, much bigger than itself. Sort of the equivalent of the Tasmanian devil. If I'd been doing a character foreign, I might have made up a Tasmanian devil.
Sure.
But so I came up with the name. Once I decided, I called in Len, who was writing the Hulk. It seemed like a good place to introduce it, and I asked him, but of course he didn't, have a lot of choice in the matter, nor did he have any objections, that I would like him right away to introduce in some story, and I think he was just about to take the character up north, or maybe he did it for that reason. I'm not sure exactly. But anyway, I said I wanted this Canadian character. He's called Wolverine, and one of the main things is, besides being fierce, bad-tempered, like a Wolverine, I said I wanted him to be short, because all these heroes are always, they're always 6 foot something,
Sure.
And I felt Wolverine, I got no objection to Hugh Jackman playing him and everything like this, but in the comic book, I said I wanted him to be short, Now, Len went off and kind of rediscovered the wheel, I guess, and forgot that I had told him this, but I told him, I said, if he or artist Herb Trippy or somebody had brought in a tall Wolverine, they'd have been back to the drawing board. I said, he's short and he's mean. And after that point, except for maybe looking over John Romita's shoulder a tiny bit, Len did more of that while I was, while the character was being developed. After that point, I sort of left it all to Len and John Romita and Herb. I had done my part. It was sort of the equivalent of a one-night stand, I guess. I go in, have my fun, and then I get out and leave somebody else do all the work. And of course, so all the the development work, that was all done by Ramita designing the costume, and then Herb is the artist, and then Dave Cockrum came in and did other things with it, maybe making it look more like his character, especially when he took the mask off, and things of this sort. But I thought, well, I'd done the job that I was hired for, which was to make up the idea for a good character, turn it over to a talented writer and a talented artist, and, then stand aside and watch them do their stuff. They came up either, Len or Claremont with all the other stuff, like the adamantium claws. That was all them. Of course, I'd made up adamantium, but they were the ones that gave Wolverine adamantium claws.
Sure.
And then of course, when we decided to do the X-Men as an international group, of course, the Wolverine was a logical, member, for that as well.
Understood. No, and it reminds me of the creation of Barry Allen, and that he has many fathers as well,
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, no.
Yeah, I was always wondering when they were going to do a Green Lantern movie. I said, well, who are they going to credit on the Green Lantern movie? Are they going to credit Martin O'Dell and Bill Finger, who created the original, or are they just going to credit, say, Julie Schwartz, who should be in there too, John Broome and Gil Kane, who did the 60s. They solved that problem by not crediting anybody.
Yeah, I know. I was going to ask, and I guess not. You're right about that. Yeah, that they didn't.
They left the credits out entirely, which was unfair to all concerned.
Agreed. And one of my
the only thing worse is Wonder Woman, a really good movie. But the co-creator, as far as I'm concerned, an original artist of Wonder Woman, is not even mentioned in that movie. They've got credits at the end for Ross Andrew, Bob Kanigher, George Perez, 10 other people who have done Wonder Woman over the years, and of course Marston at the beginning. But there's no mention in the entire movie of H.G. Peter, who at least designed or co-designed the costume and drew the character from 1941 to 1958, almost every single story, except for 3 or 4.
Yeah,
and they totally screwed his memory because he doesn't have a legal representing force, I guess.
Yeah, isn't that the way? And that's a shame. And that's funny. I was just talking to Denny O'Neil the other day, and he was pointing out the benefits of having, and I forget the guy's name, Howard Chaykin's lawyer. And everyone luckily is, getting a check because they've all kind of allied themselves with Howard Chaykin's lawyer and are getting what they deserve in terms of their contributions.
Yeah, I don't get involved with lawyers. Whenever Marvel came to me about the deal, I had a couple of offers not from Chaykin himself, because we weren't in close contact, but somebody else offered to have a lawyer, might be the same guy, and so forth. Maybe I should have done it. Maybe I'd get a better deal, but I just didn't want to get involved with lawyers. So I accepted the deal they gave me. Maybe I won't get rich from it, but I'm happy with it.
Okay, you're content with it. That's the important thing.
Yeah. Well, if I'd like them to even give me more money.
Well, sure.
But I'm doing all right.
Well, that's cool. I should mention Alter Ego because, God, thank you for doing that book, because I think pre-1980s, as much as the 20th century has been documented, that's where the whole start is really when you start in even the 70s. They didn't film everything. They didn't videotape everything, certainly. And I'm really glad that you have been doing these great interviews with, Golden Age creators that have kind of slipped through the cracks. And I love it. And do you record those? Do you tape record those as well?
Well, I don't do many interviews myself. At the beginning of the thing, I did a handful of them. But I didn't. I felt like it's not my thing exactly, although I could do it, and B, I was lucky to run into other people that could do it better. Particularly in the early days, Jim Amish did this wonderful series of interviews for about 100 issues, and now Richard Arndt has taken over, and he's done some really fine ones. And there's other people in between that do individual things. So they do the recording. Of course, there are almost no Golden Age people around to be interviewed now anymore.
Yeah.
But at least we got a lot of them down on tape, while we could. And now I find I'm interviewing widows or children, but some of those people, or having articles that that study those people and do research on them. But it's you get the first person accounts while you can, and then after that you get the other people that remember the person, or you go by records or whatever. And at least that first 100 issues or so, I was able to get a lot of the Golden Age people, and of course a lot of Silver Age people are gone too.
Yeah. Would you consider ever releasing the tapes? Because that's one of my favorite things on John Cook's Will Eisner documentary that he put together. Those shop talk interviews that Eisner did, that he collected in a trade paperback. But it was so great to hear him one-on-one with Kniff and Kirby and
well, the interviews are all the interviews mostly aren't my property, except for the handful I did myself with guys like Ramita and Erwin Hayes and a couple of them in the early days. They're the property of the people like Jim and Richard and others who do them. So anybody who wanted to approach them for the tapes, they would have them. You know, they may have made copies, you know, for a transcriber if they didn't transcribe them themselves. But they would have the tapes, and they are perfectly, you know, legally capable of, you know, of giving those tapes or selling those tapes or, you know, doing anything they want with them, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that's why I was hoping you might, with your conversations, put out an audio product of some sort, and especially, you know, in this digital age, it'd be great to have an MP3 download that you might sell of these great conversations,
well,
because you know, your insight.
I'm kind of a print person, you know. I'm kind of a print person, and I haven't. I don't know. I'm 77. I haven't got the ambition to suddenly be working a lot with a lot of tapes, or well, you know, now would be. I mean, listen, you know, I'm just now getting into, you know, DVDs and CDs, and I'll be lucky to be able to buy the next PC and have a CD player in it. You know, I mean, I just wish they wouldn't invent anything for a couple of years. Give us a chance to catch up. You know,
I do understand.
You just get used to something, and and suddenly it's obsolete. I mean, you know, it goes the way. You know, a few ideas deserve to go away, like 8-track tapes, you know, which were never any damn good anyway.
I remember
but
tapes, absolutely.
I mean, God, I used to play those in the car, and
yes.
I remember trying to play Chorus Line, and half the songs were interrupted in the middle where the track turned over. But, you know, but the other things, CDs and DVDs, those are wonderful things, and now everybody wants this stupid streaming, and
yes.
That's fine, but, you know, but why not be able to have an actual, you know, copy of something yourself and everything? I prefer that, and, you know, I'll be lucky to be able to keep getting them. So I don't really want to get involved with making a lot of, you know, I think it's great that John Cook and these other people do that, but I'm not that interested in doing that myself. If Jim Amish and these other people wanted to make something out of their tapes or whatever, that would be just wonderful, or somebody else put them together. Well, you know, they could do it. They don't need Alter Ego for that. The only thing we retain is the right to reprint the article or interview one time, and that's it. You know, other than that, it belongs totally to the interviewer. That's
cool, and that's great. And obviously, as a creator, that's great that you're thinking along those lines. So, do you shape the editorial? Like, you know, okay, this is going to be the subject this month. What is your, beyond the articles that you write and the editorial at the front and stuff? What do you do for Alter Ego?
Well, I totally decide what's going to be in it, but of course I'm at the mercy of, you know, of what somebody else does.
Sure, what's coming in.
Sometimes the idea is mine to do, you know, and I suggest to an interviewer that he interview this person or that person, or I solicit, how about you writing this article, or, you know, talk somebody into writing an article or whatever. But a lot of times the interviewer, Jim Amish before and Richard Arndt and others now, they bring me the idea and say, you know, how about I interview this person or that person? Like one issue, it'll be something that was, you know, my idea, and sometimes another. For example, the issue that will be coming out in a few months that I just put to bed has a long interview with the widow of Norman Maurer, if you know who that is.
I do know Norman Maurer. Explain. Yes, please.
Yeah, Norman Maurer was he's known in part for being the partner at St. John in the era of the 3D comics of Joe Kubert. He did all these wonderful Three Stooges comics, partly because he was the son-in-law of Mo Howard, the leader of the Three Stooges. And so we're interviewing Mo's daughter, Joan, who was Norman's wife, and we got an interview that deals with the Stooges and their comics and Norman and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, that's really good. In this case, I knew Joan slightly. I got to meet Norman a couple of years before he passed away. He came to a party at my place even, and I was just really pleased I got to know him. A great talent. And I'd always wanted to do an interview, you know, with Joan. So we got that together. But I had, you know, Richard, you know, do it, and he did a wonderful job. And another time, Richard will have he'll have an idea of somebody he wants to interview, and that's what Jim Amish, when he was doing all these, he would every month. He would come like, you know, how about I interview this guy and that guy? And I'd say, okay, go do it and send it in when it's done. You know, that I'd make an issue out of it. You know, I just put together the issues from whatever is available. But of course, now I have to sort of figure it out a year or two ahead of time, so I always know what's coming up.
That's excellent. And
I've got way more stuff on the shelf that I'd be able to use in several years, and it makes me feel guilty because there's some stuff I had and I can't seem to find the right place, to put it in,
I understand.
Because if something isn't quite a cover feature, then I have to figure out, well, where can I, what issue can I fit it in where it'll have enough space, but it won't have to be the cover,
I understand, and they're amazing surprises every time Alter Ego comes out. I love comic book history, and mentioning Norman Mauer, I have to let you know, when I was in high school, I interviewed Norman Mauer because I had read Moe's book, and also I think Three Stooges scrapbook might have come out then as well that Joan had a part in. And I had no idea while I was interviewing Norman. I mostly focused on the Stooges, and Norman also was the producer of a lot of their '60s films as well. And
all of them, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. And
there's about 3 or 4 or 5 of them. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really where they made, thankfully, the bulk of their money, because I know Columbia.
Right. The best stuff was the shorts, but the fact remains, at least the ones who survived, the 2 brothers or one of the brothers, and and Larry Fine were able to make a little more money maybe in their later years, because I think they got kind of screwed on those short
Absolutely.
subjects.
Oh, yeah. And I before he passed away, had a conversation with Joe Kubert about Norman, and I'm kicking myself that I didn't get the chance to interview Joe about Norman, because, I think I'm glad you're doing this.
Yeah, they were good friends from first to last for like 50, 60 years, more like the 30 or 40 years that, Norman was alive.
I hear you. Well, and also the contribution that Norman made to comics, like you say, with St. John's and those 3D comics, were really this interesting chapter. And he was he was a good artist as well. I mean, that's why I'm kicking myself.
He did wonderful work for the Lev Gleason people on Daredevil and Crime Buster back in those days.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So forth. It's funny, those comics aren't collected much now, and they don't seem to have much respect. Along with the Crime Does Not Pay, that was the biggest seller.
Yes.
But in terms of writing and drawing, the Lev Gleason, Crime Buster, and Daredevil stuff in Daredevil and Boy Comics was some of the best stuff that was on the market at the time, and some of the best sellers.
I wonder if that stuff is tied in some sort of ownership litigation.
No.
Oh, it's not?
It's just because they're not the straight superhero type as much. I mean, Daredevil got overshadowed by that kid gang, the little wise guys.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And Crime Buster sort of, I don't know, that for a while they called him CB, and they sort of got rid of the superhero look to him and so forth, and they had a more realistic, Crime Does Not Pay kind of story in there than they had in Superman or Captain Marvel or Captain America.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, it's probably more modern in a lot of ways, more modern in its sensibility than a lot of the comics from that period. More maturely done, but doesn't get much respect nowadays.
Yeah, I don't understand that, and I agree with you. And it seemed like Crime Buster became more of a straight-laced Archie in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you, and also
he ended up reverting back to his real name of Chuck Chandler and just going to college and having varsity adventures. By that time, I knew he was about dead, and pretty soon he was gone. And of course, Daredevil had one of the great costumes. The original Daredevil had one of the great costumes of all time.
Well, and I appreciated in your alter ego stories when you used your hero alter ego that you brought back the Claw, his great nemesis and everything. Daredevil's.
Yeah. And of course, I swiped the costume for 3D Man at Marvel, or just made it red and green instead of red and blue.
I did
swipe there. I think I even named him Chuck Chandler.
I didn't even realize that 3D Man was a swipe from Daredevil. That's fantastic. Again, because the original Daredevil, that costume had a great look, and I know. Pete Morrissey obviously I think swiped a lot for Thunderbolt. With Pete admitted that he based it on Daredevil and so forth, and I based 3D Man on it. And before that, I had made up a character called Gemini, who was a member of the Zodiac group that grew out of the Steranko stuff, and I gave him that same costume before, but there it was black and white. Oh, I didn't realize that. That's fantastic.
Never swipe something once if you could swipe it twice. That's my amendment of Wally Wood's old thing about never draw anything you can trace.
That's fantastic. Jeez. Well, I wanted to get back real fast to All Star Squadron and just ask that core group of Tarantula, Liberty Bell, Johnny Quick. Why those characters? What made you like those? And Robot Man obviously is another one of those guys.
Well, mostly because they were the ones that had not so much Liberty Bell. I needed a woman in the group, and there weren't that many female, heroes at times.
Yes.
But with Robot Man, Johnny Quick, Shining Knight and his horse,
Yes.
later Tarantula with the webbing anyway.
Yes.
I wanted them in there because they were the characters that had superpowers. You know, I mean, otherwise, a lot of the other DC characters outside the Justice Society, as some of them inside, were characters that they were just guys in masks. And that's okay, but, you know, you have you can't, I didn't want a League of Batmen.
Understood.
You know, I mean, if you get Green Arrow with his arrows, he's okay. You know, but you get this guy and that guy. Next thing you know, there'd be a bunch of people, but they wouldn't really have any special powers. And you know, I wanted to, you know, and of course in the Justice Society, at least you had Hawkman flying, you had Green Lantern and the Flash and Wonder Woman. The Atom got super strength at least after a while, and so forth. But you know, so I wanted to use the characters that had the superpowers. You know, Johnny Quick's speed and you know, Robot Man's power and all that.
I loved your...
So that was the reason why I used those particular characters.
I understand. I loved your bookend origin of the Justice Society and then the last days of the Justice Society. I thought those were incredible stories. And really...
Well, I hated doing that because that was what they wanted at the time, was to get rid of them. You know, they said they were never going to use them again. You know.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking. Believe me.
But of course they lied. You know, they always use them again.
I understand.
And I knew they would use them again. It's not like I ever believed them. It's, you know, it's like Sam Spade said, we didn't believe you. We believed your $200. You know.
Well, but you gave them a back door to come back through and everything, putting them in Ragnarok and, you know, leaving the possibility.
Well, I knew they'd bring him back anyway, whatever they told me. You know, Dick Giordano, I mean, I don't say he was lying, but Dick Giordano told me, as long as I'm editor here, they'll never be brought back. Well, maybe they were gone by the time maybe he was gone by the time they came back. But, you know, it was only a couple of years before they came back again. I knew that. I mean, by that time I knew after having been through the Crisis stuff and been misled about that, I knew DC and what it would do and how it would, you know, go back and rethink anything it told me and disown it if it was convenient to them. I knew them well enough by that time to know that was going to happen. So I just figured, well, if they let me kill these characters off, I'll kill them off. But I know they'll be back, you know.
Well, and I appreciated probably the frustration you were going through, because I don't know how All Star Squadron was selling at the time of Crisis, but to take away the parallel worlds and the history out from under you, and that you had to obviously respond back with the Young All Stars to kind of come up with, you know, different heroes that could replace the Trinity. And, you know, what, you know, so, tell me, you know, when you say that they misled you about Crisis, what did they, if you don't mind, I'm curious what they told you.
No. I mean, I've said it everywhere else. I mean, you know, I was told, you know, it's the funny thing is I can't remember which of them told me. It might have been Dick Giordano, but I don't want to put all the blame off on him because he was in conference with, you know, with Jeanette and so forth. But I was told sort of that, you know, that they wouldn't even do Crisis if I objected because it was going to ruin my characters. And, you know, Jesus, I knew that wasn't true. If they thought of this idea, they're going to do it. you know, and I could either say stop Steamroller, or I can get on the Steamroller and ride it somewhere. So I decided to just get on because they were going to do it anywhere. But I tried to steer it by saying all I really want is at the end of the thing that there's some like pocket universe, you know, like another, you know, where it exists. And they told me, oh yeah, you can do that. And then later they decided that truth was no longer operative, as they used to say back during the Nixon days. And you know, but they had told me, oh, you know, I'd be able to use Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman and those in the thing and so forth. And then I found out, I think from Marv Wolfman, when I ran into him in England, not from anybody at D.C. who would have the decency to tell me, that truth was no longer operative, and I wouldn't be able to do it. So when I got back, they decided they needed to kill the book. It was not selling great. We'd never adequately replaced the art by Buckler and Ordway totally, but and maybe there were other things I did wrong, but. We were jumping around from artists. It was doing all right. It could have survived easily. But the thing is, at that particular time, it got derailed. And since it wasn't the top seller, they didn't have to worry about saving it. It was just simpler. And they tried to make it look as if they were doing me a favor by making it start over with a new number 1, which was going to be still called All Star Squadron, like Volume 2. But it was going to have a bunch of different characters and downplay, you know, the JSA characters. And so, working on this, my wife came up with the name Young All-Stars. I don't know if there was ever another group of heroes, you know, with the word young in front of it. Now it seems like there are about 57 of them. But, you know, Young Avengers, Young this, Young that, Young Justice. But I don't know if there was that much before Young All-Stars, but that was her idea for a title, and I figured, well, that made more sense, and I liked it better because it wasn't really the All Star Squadron. It was like a subset of the All Star Squadron. And maybe a little like Jerry Conway when he did the All Star Squad.
Yes, the Super
as part of
Squad.
JSA.
Yes.
Yeah, the Super Squad stuff. And so I did the best I could, and I had fun with it. And I guess the two series together had like a 100-issue run, which isn't bad.
Like I said, man, I read every one. And Iron Monroe, I thought, was a very interesting character that I don't know if was it the intent to have him kind of be a mystery sort of Superman character? I know about his origins in, I want to say, the Gladiator a short story, correct? Or a novel?
Yes. Yeah. Well, he was the son of that character.
Yeah. And I mean, it just seemed like he had a mysterious background, it seemed, while while he was in your hands. And
I just felt that since I felt that Gladiator had influenced Superman, I figured that if I'm going to have to replace Superman, let's replace it with somebody who's the son of the character from Gladiator.
That's simple. Okay. Because, I like how the story progressed in other people's hands as well. I think Mark Andreyko in one of his books, I think he continued Iron Monroe's story as an older man.
Well, those are all clones. I don't count any of that stuff.
Is that true? When other people work on your creations, it's like,
that's true. The one and only, I mean, not that I have great respect for him,
sure.
but the one and only conversation I ever had in my life with Neil Gaiman was when he called me to tell me that he was killing off Fury in Sandman, and did I mind? And I told him no, because it's just a clone. She's really alive, and the minute if I ever came back in and took DC, she'd be back 3 minutes later. I said, it's all just, it's just all words on paper, as you know as well as I do. We've never spoken since, Neil and I, so I guess he accepted that. I don't know.
Now, as an original, and forgive me, because obviously there were fans that came before you as well, but your activity in the fan journalism world is well known to us that pay attention to stuff like that. I mean, do you ever step back and look at, like, the stuff that, us podcasters are doing and the websites now that have the news? What do you think of where the fanzines have evolved?
Yeah, this is like the modern day successors. The internet and everything. They're all the modern day successors to the fanzines we did with a much better technology.
Fair enough. That's true. Absolutely.
And if I were growing up and knew my way around a computer, maybe if I was younger and maybe I'd be doing something like this. But as is, all I can do is put out this little magazine, and an occasional comic book story or whatever.
Do you still have a couple comic stories you want to do?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'd like to, of course, what I'd really like to do is write All Star Squadron again, or Conan, more than anything.
Oh, that'd be great.
And I wouldn't mind making up some new characters, or I've got a couple of them. I can't find the time to work on them. So I probably should get back to that in a second. I keep my hand in. I work on the Spiderman newspaper strip with Stan and have for like the past 18 years.
Yeah, forgive me, and I think I might have a couple strips that have Stan's name on it, but likely were from your time with.
Well, if it came after about 1999, 2000.
Okay, then I do.
And everything.
I bought them from Alex.
But Stan was rewriting, was editing those and so forth, and everything. Sometimes, lightly, sometimes, more heavily. And, and once in a while, I do a lot of introductions. I just did a 11,000-word introduction to a reprinting the first omnibus Conan volume that Marvel's going to do.
Oh, that's great.
Come out at the end of the year. They asked me for 4,000 words, so I gave them 11,000 and said, I'll cut it down if you want. And they said, no, we'll take it.
That's great. Oh, I'm so glad.
We'll pay you for the 4,000 and take the 11,000. That's fine with me. I said, it's just,
No, go on.
I'm glad Marvel's got Conan back because Dark Horse is a fine company, but I didn't like they had recoloring and they put everything out just in paperback, and I wanted to see it collected in hardcovers and so forth. So I'm very happy that Marvel is doing it, and this guy Corey Suttlemeyer that does the reprint books is really has really got a great plan for reprinting all that stuff.
Understood, and what a great run. And good Lord. I mean, you and Barry Windsor Smith and the others that worked with you as well. I mean, Jesus, man, especially.
Obviously, I'd like to write Conan again. Now that they've got it back and they claim they're going to do 3 books about him, I'd love to be able to do one of them. And, I've had conversations with them about that, but that's up to them. My feeling is, I'd like to do it, but my feeling is basically, if in order to secure my little tiny reputation, my little tiny corner in comics history, I have to write one more damn comic book, then I'm already a failure. If what I've done already isn't enough, I'm not going to salvage anything by doing a handful more.
Yeah, I would think the 10,000 plus stories that you've likely done.
Well, I don't know if it's that many, but it's enough.
I don't know, man, because I remember when we were saying that about Stan in the 90s and 2000s, and geez, Roy, I mean, you've been doing it for 40 plus years or whatever. So I don't know.
Yeah, although not so much. Last 10 or 15 years, I haven't been writing many comic books.
Fair enough.
More alter ego and the strip and everything. Anyway, I better get going,
Yes.
I guess. But I guess I'll see you at the Terrificon there in. What is the date of that again?
August 17th, I believe. And yes, I'm looking forward to our conversations there.
Yeah, it'll be my third year there in a row. I had a lot of fun last year. I think the Iron Fist actors were there.
Oh, that's great. Did you have a chance?
And everything.
Yeah.
So I've enjoyed that convention. Mitch puts on a good show with a lot of guests.
Absolutely.
I've been going to a couple of comic conventions recently where it seems like the main guests were wrestlers, and well, that's nice. It doesn't have any interest for me, so I'll be glad to see showbiz and comic book people again, I guess.
Oh no, and Terrificon is a very pure comic book show. All people have to do is go to the website to check it out. You've been very.
That's one of the things I like. They have a few other guests, but it's a real comic book show, like the Charlotte Heroes Convention and things like that. Those are the comic conventions I like the best.
Me too, man. Listen, you've been generous with your time. I hope you.
Okay, well, thanks.
I hope you'll come back and we can talk more because your body of work. I knew we couldn't cover it in a half hour, and certainly not even in an hour. So I hope you had fun, and I hope you'll be willing to come back sometime.
Oh, yeah, we'll come back. I'll talk about my Millie the Model work.
It'd be my pleasure to hear you talk about Millie the Model. But thank you for your time, Roy.
Oh, thank you.
That's Roy Thomas. Don't forget, Roy will be at Terrificon along with me and lots of great creators. Forget about me. Come see Roy Thomas. Come see Denny O'Neil, Joe Giella, and, of course, current people like Tim Seeley and my buddy Mike Norton. And so many great, Christopher Priest is going to be there. Oh, my God, what a lineup at Terrificon. It's starting on August 17th. Go to Terrificon.com, and you will find some amazing creators that are going to be there. And I want to thank John Cimino again for helping organize this interview with Roy Thomas. It's greatly appreciated. All right, let's switch gears now and talk with one of the modern creators that is going to be at Terrificon, and that's Ryan Stegman. Man, I'm telling you, I love seeing Stegman stuff. As I told him on the interview, not only his interiors and his great cover work for Marvel, but when he does a commission, too, man, he just outdoes himself. Even this week on Twitter, just yesterday, he posted an incredible Thor piece, and I'm like, I want to see him do Thor. I love his Spider-Man work. He's currently working on Venom with Donny Cates. It's a great book, and I'm really happy to have this opportunity to have a great conversation with Ryan Stegman. Again, Ryan will also be at Terrificon as well, so I hope you enjoyed this talk with Ryan Stegman, talking Spider-Man, his whole career background, pretty amazing story, and what he's doing these days with Venom. Ryan Stegman now on Word Balloon. Finally, Ryan Stegman. Welcome to Word Balloon. And I say finally because I blame myself. We've known each other for about 8 years at least, and I've always meant to have you on, Ryan. I'm sorry that it's finally, here we are, finally.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me on. Pretty excited, and I don't know how it kept falling apart, but, it was probably my fault, so I'm glad to finally do it.
That always happens. I'll talk to somebody at a convention, and then I look up, and it's like, yeah, that was 15 months ago. Not even a year. Longer.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, my God.
Well, I seem to reach out, and then I just forget.
All good. Well, I'm very excited about what you got going on, but we really should go back because I'd like to I've never had the Ryan Stegman origin story.
Mm-hmm.
So after the ship landed from Krypton, what happened?
So you mean like the comic book origin? So
yes.
As a kid, I wanted to be an animator. I was obsessed with animation and Disney animation essentially.
Okay.
But I saw a documentary once where it looked like a real job, so then that kind of went out the window, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with this sort of, I knew I had an ability. My sister and I would draw all the time.
Cool.
So then when I was about 15, I walked into a comic book store because I really didn't have access to comic books for the longest time. It was kind of, just didn't have a store around. I don't know, you just kind of, I had a couple comics here and there, but so I wandered into a store when I was 15 and was just like, oh yeah, that's what I want to do.
Cool.
And then, I just started putting stuff on. I mean, like from that age, I was pretty dogged about it. I had a 4-year interruption where I was in college where I didn't really do anything with it. But as soon as I got out, I moved back in with my parents and didn't make any money and did samples and got a job doing a Midnight Kiss book for Marcosia. Parlayed that into Magician Apprentice, which was Dable Brothers, and then Marvel bought the Dable Brothers, and then I had Marvel editors, and I've never worked for anybody else since.
Wow, that's really amazing. Who wrote Midnight Kiss?
Tony Lee.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, he does a lot of he was doing a lot of Marcosia stuff at the time, and I think he's done some Doctor Who and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's cool. Yeah. Excellent. And then the Dable Brothers too, and it was Magician's Apprentice, you say?
Yeah, it was. So the novel adaptation, they were doing a bunch of novel adaptations, and it was just. I mean, it was totally random that Marvel bought them. I mean, that was pretty surprising. I was like 23 years old, and all of a sudden, I was getting, I was there, but I was bad. I'll be honest, I was not good. But I think that it was Mark Paniccia was the editor. Him and cool. Jordan White. Actually, Jordan White came in at the exact same time as me. And I think Mark saw that that I probably wasn't there yet, but then he realized I was like a young guy, and that I was really eager to learn. And I would ask him, please, if you have any criticisms, throw them my way. And then he would give me criticisms, and I would actually incorporate them. Which as a guy, I give criticism sometimes, and people don't incorporate them, and it drives you nuts. Right. But I think he saw that, and then he was just kind of keeping me afloat until he started giving me Marvel Adventures work. Then it was Incredible Hercules. Then it was She-Hulk, and then the sad thing is that he basically floated me and kept me going, got me up to She-Hulk, and then we haven't worked together since.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I every time I see him, I'm like, Mark, we got to do something again soon. And, he kind of was talking to me a little bit about doing some X-Men stuff recently, but I ended up doing the Venom thing.
Understood. I always liked him as an editor because it always seemed like he got the quirky books. Like from Agents of Atlas with Parker and Hardman and others I can't even remember what umbrella title it was, but I know they brought back like Frankenstein Monster and a bunch of the monster heroes and characters from the black and white magazines and stuff. So I always appreciated his, like I said, kind of the stuff that flew under the radar, the stuff that didn't have to tie into the events.
Right. But he's great.
Yeah. So, but Marvel Adventures, I want to. Which did you do? Spiderman there? Did you? Which characters did you do for them? That was the YA imprint for a while.
Yeah, it was Spiderman, and
there you go.
That was kind of a crazy because my whole goal in life was to draw Spider-Man. I remember kind of telling, like, even though it was Marvel Adventure, still I was so grateful and excited. It was
sure.
It was crazy, and that stuff. The first issue I did of it, I would say, not very good, but I feel like I improved pretty rapidly, and the second one was actually pretty all right. And once I got comfortable, I felt like it really started to come together.
That's cool, and we're gonna obviously get into more Spider-Man shortly, but She-Hulk was next.
Let's see, so. No, Incredible Hercules.
Excuse me, Incredible Hercules. Right. So that was that Greg Pak and Van Lente doing?
Yep, it sure was. Yeah.
Excellent. No, that was a really fun series, and I thought, very well written and very well drawn. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was great. I came in to do like 3 issues at a point. I can't remember which issue numbers, but yeah, that was the thing I think that got me on other editors' radars and kind of got me. To the point where Mark, I talked to him at one point, and he was telling me, "Oh, you're really generating a lot of buzz around the office." And
Cool.
Yeah, and then, that was kind of the beginning of not having to worry so much about where my next job was coming from.
That's cool. Did you ever sign an exclusive, or were you always just, luckily a guy that they could count on and then would get another assignment?
I did. So after I did Incredible Hercules, I got these Red She-Hulk backup stories that were in Incredible Hulk.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah.
That's Betty. That would be Betty as Betty Ross as the Incredible She-Hulk. And
right.
That was during Loeb doing, of course, Thunderbolt Ross as the Red Hulk. So.
Mm-hmm. And I did that, and then I did a SIF one-shot, and then I asked for a raise for the first time in my career. And I was kind of waiting around, and they were like, "Oh, they kind of were stalling, and I couldn't figure out why." And then Mark was like, "Don't worry, it's good. Blah. It was. We're working on it." And then I went to C2E2, I believe, and David Bogart came up to my table and said, "I think they had been waiting to tell me in person, and they said we want you to. We would like you to sign an exclusive contract." And I've been under contract ever since. I mean, I've signed multiple ones. I'm working on signing another one right now, and but yeah, it's been like 4 exclusive contracts since then.
That's excellent, man.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I think you've made yourself known. You're an incredible Spider-Man artist, and I'm glad they keep rewarding you by having you on Spider-Man books and Spider-Man related books. Of course, currently with Donny Cates on Venom. But I want to talk about your work with Jerry Conway, too. Now, there's probably like a big leap between what came after the She-Hulk backups.
That was when I got... Well, then I did a She-Hulk series.
So that wasn't the Slott series. Who was it? Go on.
It was Harrison Wilcox. He was Jeff Loeb's assistant. And then he started writing for Marvel. Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah. A great guy. Yes, who he put me in touch with was... of all people, he's like, "Hey, Scott Porter from Friday Night Lights," and and I forget his show with Rachel Bilson, Heart of Dixie. Mm-hmm. He's like, he goes, "Hey, he really listens to Word Balloon. He wants to come on." I'm like, "Yes, please."
Yeah,
and
he's a huge comic book fan.
Great guy, ridiculously good guy. And I just laugh because he's this big, good-looking dude and everything. I'm like, "What the hell are you doing, wasting time listening to me?" This is before he got married. I'm like, "Go out and date people." I'm like, I wouldn't be listening to my podcast if I looked like you, man. I'd be out having fun. He's like, "I can do both," and I'm like, no problem. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he was terrific, man. And yeah, Harrison's the guy that put us together. So I think he's working still with Marvel Animation these days.
Yeah, he's still over there at this. I think that the reason he had to stop writing for Marvel was because they don't allow like that kind of crossover anymore.
Sure.
But he's doing great, I think. I talk to him on Twitter sometimes, and we kind of stay in touch here and there. Very
cool. So then after the She-Hulk thing, then what happened?
Then I got I did some X-23.
Very nice.
Man, I can't believe how long, my memory, I can't even handle it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, buddy. I know. I should have the comic book database up here and then having all your credits and stuff. But no, I was interested before you get to, and I know it's a lot of work, obviously, but eventually I want to start talking about you and Jerry Conway working together.
Right.
Which is only a couple of years ago, but I loved that series. And I know now it's and it's in excellent hands. Again, another reason why I've been meaning to talk to you, and also have Jerry back to talk about it as well. Because
Jerry's awesome.
Classic Spider-Man writer. He blew my 9-year-old mind in Marvel Tales. I'm not that old that I read the original Death of Gwen Stacy, but I did read the first reprint of it in Marvel Tales, and my head exploded in the best possible way of like, wow, they can die? Lois Lane never died. It was like, holy shit. And no, what a great person to then, be the caretaker. Remind me, was it the whole idea of Secret Wars, and that's what birthed this series? Is that correct?
Yeah, they did they did all the alternate universe type stuff because there was all these different universes, and this was a universe. There was a mini series that Slott wrote with Adam Kubert. Was it Adam or Andy? Oh, I can never.
It was
definitely
one of the Kuberts. Yes.
Yeah, a very good series. And
yes,
that was so wildly popular that they said let's make a full series out of it. And so it's Elseworlds, but it's not in continuity. But the idea behind it was there's so many people that love the spider marriage between Mary Jane and Peter that they wanted to. They said, here, if you guys like it so much, here it is. And
continue the story. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. No, and it just like Spider-Girl years before with DeFalco and Ron Friends, no, it opens up this whole new world. It's another reason why I loved, back when I was younger, in Superman Family, they had Mr. and Mrs. Superman, and it was Earth 2 Superman, and Paul Kupperberg drew it, one of the classic Lois Lane artists and stuff, and it's just like, yeah, go. Or even more recently, J.T. Kroll, they had an adjacent Batman Beyond book that continued the Batman Beyond universe with other heroes. And J.T. was writing Superman Beyond. And it was, senior citizen Superman who had abandoned his Clark Kent identity coming back. And it's like, okay, he's back on Earth and wants to be more with the people. So he's going to have a new secret identity. And he was a volunteer fireman. And his name was Cal and everything. And it was great. It's like, oh, this is great. And by the same token, these stories of not only Spider-Man and Mary Jane, but again, their daughter as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always like the out of continuity stuff because you don't get affected by the other stuff, and you can just do pretty much whatever you want, and that's pretty much what we did.
That's excellent. And Mary Jane, did she have powers, or did Peter just give her equipment to be able to swing along with the family and everything?
He gave her powers. She siphoned off of him essentially, so he was a less powered Peter Parker, but they both kind of had half of his full power set. So
okay, all right. Well, as we know, he surprisingly is one of the stronger heroes of the Spider-Verse, and I liked when Slott was doing Superior Spider-Man, and Doc Ock didn't realize how strong Peter really was until he shattered I believe Scorpion's jaw, and he's like, oh my God, he was holding back all these years.
Yep.
Pretty cool. Or my favorite too in Civil War when he goes to the cell block and beats the hell out of the Kingpin, and it's no contest, and it's just like, yeah, he's really, really angry, and it's like, let's go. So who do you enjoy drawing in the Spider-Verse beyond the family?
Well, I mean, I love all of the Spider-Man. Like, I did a bunch of the Superior Spider-Man run, and
I forgot about that. Shame on me. Please go on.
Yeah, his Rogues Gallery is the best. So I got to draw some Green Goblin, which was incredible, and the Vulture. Weirdly, what's weird is I had never drawn Venom in any of the Spider-Man books I did, and then all of a sudden, the last few issues of Renew Your Vows I did were Venom stories. Then I did Venom Inc., and now I'm doing Venom. It was like all of a sudden it was just like a deluge of Venom. But
you were one of Slott's go-to guys in the last couple of years, weren't you, on Spider-Man?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
a lot of arcs.
Yeah, I would have liked to have. I was going to contribute to that 800 issue, but the Venom kind of ate up my schedule.
Sure.
But yeah, no, Spider-Man is my favorite character, and Dan's an amazing writer, so I was just always, anytime they wanted to put me in that world, I was all for it.
That's cool. What was it like collaborating with Slott? What kind of writer is he?
He's super collaborative. He's very, how you've had him on here, right?
Oh, many times. Just when we just did talk after 801 came out, we did the exit interview with him and everything. Yeah, he's a Word Balloon regular. Go on.
He's very. He kind of reminds me of like a Stan Lee type. Like, he's very excited, and he'll when he explains to you the stories before you draw them, it's like the most exciting thing in the world because he's such a good he's not just a good writer. He also is a good speaker, and so Yeah, he would call and he would tell me what's going to happen, and he would be telling me like 10 years down the line what he's going to be doing, and all these. He just had so much stuff going on in his head. It was nuts.
How many years did you spend with him writing Spider-Man books?
Let's see. I think I just did about 1 year on Superior, and then I came back recently to do the Venom Inc. story. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I worked. Oh, and I did. That was so. After I did She-Hulk's, I got an issue of Amazing Spider-Man, and that was issue 667, I believe. And that was kind of the thing that put me on Steve Wacker's radar and Dan's radar, where they were like, "Oh, we want to give him more Spider-Man work." And so I had that first experience with him. Dan tells a story where he asked Steve if he could keep me. Then I went and did Scarlet Spider, and then Fantastic Four, and then I came back, and that's when we did Superior Spider-Man together.
Okay, let's talk about Scarlet Spider for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Ben Reilly, right?
No, this was Kane.
Oh, excuse me, Kane. So did you work with the Mad TV writer, whose name is escaping me right now?
No, I worked with Chris Yost.
Oh, sure, even better. No offense to the Patrick, and I'm forgetting Patrick's name, who used to write for Mad TV, that did some Scarlet Spider as well. But yeah, Chris Yost, he's fantastic. I love those guys.
Yeah, I love Chris.
Him and Craig Kyle, man. They're terrific writers.
I think that Chris is extremely underrated, and I think that he probably would be a bigger comics writer if he, he's off writing Thor movies and stuff. So
yeah, exactly. The first animation and then live action Marvel as well. No, he's doing fine.
Yeah, but I always want more comics out of him, but I get it.
Sure,
he's doing great in the other world.
Yeah, I gotta find. We've got a bunch of loose connections. I have to make that happen and try and get Chris on. Craig Kyle too. Mm-hmm. Again, I mean, I'm not an X-Men guy, so the few Kyle and Yost X-Men stories I read, I was like, oh my god, these are really good. And then, of course, they did. They went. They graduated to animation, and now are I don't know if Craig's still doing it, but yeah, Chris is very busy as a screenwriter. That's excellent. Mm-hmm. So, did you like do you like drawing the Scarlet Spider design? How is it like doing that, and even Venom as we get into Venom and stuff? The derivative Spider characters like this.
Well, that's a testament to the late great Steve Ditko, is that you can tweak his design, Spider-Man's design, which I think is the best in comic book history. You can tweak it because it's so strong. You can change it in so many ways, and it's still really cool. So it's always a blast to draw any of those characters. Like I got to design the Scarlet Spider costume for the new series, the one with Kane, and we just kind of riffed off of what Ditko had come up with, and I guess Kirby was probably involved in that design too a little bit, but either way, it was just when I was drawing Scarlet Spider, I felt pretty much like I was drawing Spider-Man, and then when you're drawing Venom, it's a little different, but it's there's still a lot of similarities.
Sure. Let's get into Venom talk, because I'll be honest, I liked Venom when he first showed up, and I loved that Eddie Brock was this kind of bigger, physically more menacing thing, and I thought, great villain. And I will confess, I'm not that crazy about him and I don't even know if he's a hero or an anti-hero or exactly what, but it's like, oh man, you got a good bad guy. Don't, keep him a bad guy, don't make him, I'm going to be curious when we see the movie and everything, and I'm sure you are as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. So what, tell me about Venom from your point of view.
Well, to a degree, I agree with you. I think that he's kind of, teetering. I think that he is, mostly bad, honestly. He makes bad decisions and does bad things. So he's technically a villain. And also I feel like him and Spiderman are like oil and water. So when they get tangled up, there's always, Venom is a perfect villain for him. But like in our book, I feel like the way that Donny Cates is the biggest Venom fan on the planet.
That's awesome. Well, that's what you want. You want the biggest Venom fan.
Yeah,
he's writing Venom. Go on.
He's like 3 or 4 years younger than me, and we both grew up with Venom. So,
sure.
Venom to us isn't. I think that he kind of can be sort of a joke sometimes in comics, and to us, he's deadly serious. We were reading the same stuff growing up. So, the way that Donny writes him, which is how I think it should be handled, is you don't know if he's not even you're not even sure if he's a hero in this story. He's just kind of fighting for his life, essentially.
Yeah, I started reading the story, and as I understand it, is there an alien or some sort of weird influence that's corrupting the symbiote?
Mm-hmm.
Is Flash in the story as well? I know Peter and Eddie are in the story.
No, Flash is not in the story right now.
Okay.
It's really just, basically we've just had Eddie and a bunch of characters that nobody. Well, we had Miles Morales too, but for the
yes,
part,
that's right. Yes, go on.
It's been new characters that we're creating. We're expanding his world so that he has, a whole bunch of new characters to interact with, and that's kind of that. That's the most exciting part for me. Is I feel like we're kind of making new stuff, new toys for that world.
Cool, that's excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And is Eddie still with the Bugle, or has he got a new job? Where is he as far as his civilian identity? Where's he at right now?
Right now he's been. No, I can't. We touched on it. I think he's been fired. Oh no, he was taking photos in the first issue. That's right. Yeah, he's still working for them, but that hasn't really come in. He's been on the run since issue 1. We're going through issue 6 here, and this is a really sort of epic storyline with gods and all kinds of stuff in it. So we haven't really gotten into his personal life very much yet. We showed it in the first issue that he was down and out. He's in a dingy apartment, kind of trying to make ends meet. But that's as far as we've gotten with that.
Okay, all right, that's cool. Now, tell me about writing for drawing with Donny. What's that like?
It's actually. I was thinking that when I was talking about Dan, it's very similar. When I finished Renew Your Vows, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. When I finished Venom Inc., I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, and so I was really keeping my options open. Doing I've never really turned down jobs before. I've taken everything that Marvel's ever offered.
Okay, you're doing a lot of covers too.
Yeah, I guess I felt a little bit burnt at that point for the first time, and so I was just like, well, I'm just going to wait until something really excites me. And a few things came along, and then finally this project with Donny came along, and I knew Donny. I've met Donny before, and he's very energetic and an exciting young guy and everything. And I had read some of his stuff, and I really liked it. And so they offered it to me, and then I was like, let me think about it. And then I went and read some Redneck, and then Donny called me, and then it was, like I said, exactly like when you talk to Dan, where there's just this crazy excitement, and then he's telling me what's going to happen in his, 50-issue plan for Venom. And he's telling me all these crazy things. He says, if you've read the book, there's a symbiote dragon, all this stuff. And I'm just like, okay, yep, I found it. This is what I'm going to do. This is really awesome. And so that's kind of the way that I feel about it now, is that I think that it's like one of my favorite projects that I've worked on. And I'm, like I said, I'm almost through issue. I'm going to be going into issue 6 here shortly. And I feel just as invigorated as day 1, because Donny and I talk all the time, and we hash out plans together, and we work on it. Like I'll send him designs, and we talk these things through, and it's been so collaborative and so much fun. He's someday he'll be jaded and he won't want to talk to the artists anymore, but for now we're having like the time of our lives.
That's awesome, man. And I know he is really one of the bright stars right now in Marvel. There's a regime change now, and CB's in charge. Have you had a chance to be with him? I know you guys are going to be with me at Terrificon next month at Mohegan Sun, but have you had a chance to talk to CB in his new capacity?
Yeah, absolutely. We did Conque in Mexico, and it was like there were, it was Umberto's involved with that show, and so me and Scotty went out there, and Scotty and I are really close.
Great.
And
that's cool. Yeah.
CB and Scotty are very close. So me and Scotty and CB and Ricky Purden hung out a lot, and it was really nice because CB's a great guy. It's really cool to see him get this opportunity.
I agree, man. And I really right guy for the right job, and an upbeat guy. And I think we've already seen, the changes start to happen and stuff. I mean, God, Al Ewing and company, they're killing it on that Hulk book right now. Mm-hmm. And, I think a lot of I'm really excited for Slott's Fantastic Four that's coming up. His Iron Man is great. And yeah, you can feel the vibe that I think this generation of Marvel, I think, is going to, and already has started to make some really great stories.
Yeah, he one of the things that he did that I really appreciate was when he came on, he was talking to me about my next project, and he said, honestly, he said, I don't think that you should ink yourself, and I was kind of like offended, and I was like, I kind of processed it, and then I was like, I do feel like maybe I should try this. I should try just penciling and get somebody else in here to ink me. And he's like, we'll get you somebody really good, all that stuff. And so what he was saying was that my work was inconsistent sometimes because I would ink inconsistently. I would change up styles. I'd get bored with one thing and, kind of creative ADHD or whatever. And he's right. I mean, now that I have distance from it and I went along with what he said, I can look through these things where it's like I'm just doing, like, from one issue to the next, I'm doing washes one issue and then I'm not doing the next issue. And I don't know why I do that or why I'm that way. But the Venom stuff has been extremely consistent, and it's kind of a credit to him. And I was happy to be told the truth that that people up there were kind of wondering what was going on with the style shifting, and that they were, it kind of made people trepidatious to, they were just kind of wondering which version of me they were going to get if they put me on a book.
Okay.
And yeah, so you find that stuff out, but a lot of times they don't want to tell you that stuff. So was honestly, it was so welcome that I was told that, and that they were right, so. So
who's inking you? Who's inking you now on Venom?
J.P. Mayer, who I credit there to Ricky Purden. I'd never heard of J.P. and I was looking for somebody in the style of like a Glapian or a Danny Mickey.
That's so funny. That's exactly what I saw in your art and wondered if Jonathan's name. And obviously Jonathan's very busy with Batman stuff and everything. But yeah, so go on. That's crazy. Go on.
Yeah, so we of course reached out to these guys, and they are DC exclusive or whatever. So we were racking our brains, and then Ricky said, "Hey, I've got this guy J.P. Mayer. He's done stuff for us, but he sent me some samples that are they seem to be more like in the vein of Glapian or Danny Mickey. Do you want to take a look at them?" And so I took a look, and I said, "Okay, well, they look cool, but you never know how it's going to work out." So I said, let's have him try out on a couple pages. And then he turned in one page, and I was like, oh yeah, this is exactly right. And they must have told him, go that route. And then, JP and I have talked since. He's Brazilian, so there's a bit of a language barrier. But he his favorite inkers and favorite artists line up pretty much exactly with my tastes, and so honestly, there's been like no growing pains. He just was doing, pretty much a perfect job from day one.
That's fantastic. Do you think you'll then continue to collaborate with him on whatever's after Venom?
Oh yeah, my plan is to I want to put him in a cage and not let anybody else work with him.
Or be part of those, penciler and inking, classic teams like, and now I'm blanking, of course.
Williams and Lee and.
Well, certainly, and Sinnott and Kirby, and I was thinking the great Spider-Man once, and it's always that Spider-Man team that never Mike Esposito and oh God, I can't think. Maybe this is too early for you to know who I'm talking about, but I want to, anyway.
Yeah,
it'll come to me. But that's or Hester and certainly Hester and Parks,
Yeah, it's nice when you find somebody that you can collaborate with in that way. Like there was when I started, I was over-laboring the pages so much, and now I'm getting to a place with JP where I can, I know what he's going to do with a certain thing, so I don't have to labor over these tiny little details anymore because I know that he'll handle it.
That's excellent. Yeah, I was going to ask how loose are your pencils compared to
not loose.
Okay, yeah, no, I understand, and again because you're used to finishing yourself, so sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
well, that's good.
I mean, I would say,
but
he's he's very additive. So even when I go to the hilt with my tight pencils, he's still going to add a lot to it. He's going to add some of his own flourishes that I always appreciate.
That's outstanding, man. That's very, very cool. I glossed over Jerry Conway. I wanted to ask, what was it like working with him? Because obviously he goes back to the Bronze Age. And I wondered, another guy too that has certainly spent a lot of time doing television writing as well. Mm-hmm. Diagnosis Murder and Murder, She Wrote, of course. I want to say, I forget which other cop shows that he's worked on in the past as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, he was awesome. He was. We talked a couple times, and we would talk via email, and he was. I mean, I was. You don't know. He had kind of gone away from comics for a while, so you don't know if he still got it,
right?
Or if
sure.
If it's going to work. And then, so when they offered me this book, I went and read his Carnage series, and that was great. And that was a totally different book than Renew Your Vows. But I was like, oh, yeah, he's absolutely still got it. So, and he just has the voice down so well that it was. I mean, his scripts were awesome.
That's cool. Stylistically, yeah. Go ahead. No, you're saying you can't complain, but stylistically, was his style of writing a comic script different? And are they all different? I should ask that. Really,
they're not very different. Slot's a little different. Where a lot of times, you'll get a script that it's broken down panel by panel, but it's there's no dialogue. There's just suggestions of what they're going to be saying in the panel. But for the most part, I would say most everybody's been pretty similar. But Jerry's were very modern, very exactly what I was used to. At one point I did write some of Renew Your Vows, and
cool.
I also worked Marvel style with him on a couple issues where
I was wondering if that okay, go on.
I worked Marvel style, and then actually one of the issues I worked from his outline and I scripted it. So, we kind of collaborated in that way. It was neat.
That's really cool. That's excellent, man. No, and I went back when one of his first comeback things was The Last Days of Animal Man for DC. Mm-hmm. And that was about a year or so into me doing the podcast and stuff, and I had him on then. And I've had him on once or twice since. And no, he's always great. Really interesting guy, and I think just a wonderful writer. And as you say, no, he's got the Spider-Verse's, voices in his head. No, he certainly knows how to write Spider-Man. I believe he might have written the comic strip for a while as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but I think so.
I think he's just an all-time great, and he's, still doing it. Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, I'm really glad he came back to comics and is being as well received as he is, and I look forward to whatever his next project is. Is Venom? Mm-hmm. Is it going to be a finite series, or is the hope that it's going to be ongoing, or is the intent that it's ongoing? What's going on with it?
Oh, the intent is absolutely, it's going to be ongoing. I mean, it's selling crazy, so we should be able to keep it going for a long time. I would like to do it, I feel like I did some Superior Spider-Man, but we were kind of rotating artists, and if I'm honest, Umberto is the guy, It was kind of like he's the, he's an all-time Spider-Man artist now.
Oh, so, absolutely. Umberto Ramos is amazing, absolutely.
So I think that I want to have something that I can put my stamp on, and I'm feeling so good about this series now, and I'm hoping that this is a thing that I really, can do for a long time and have it really mean something.
That's excellent, man. Very, very cool. So your boys are 7 and 4. Are they like thrilled that you're drawing Spider-Man? I mean, are they into it, or is it that's just what Dad does? I'll be busy doing something else.
They're a little into. I think that so. My 7-year-old, his friends have, they're not jaded by it. So they will come in, and when they look at my stuff, and they'll go, "Wow, that's cool," and then all of a sudden he puffs his chest out and really gets, sort of like
good.
And they both say they want to be artists when they get older and all that stuff. So I think they're pretty into it, but there's also a little aspect of they're not that interested in what Dad does, it's work or whatever. But they, it's funny watching them kind of grow up and start to grasp it more.
Are they watching the cartoons? Do they like the Marvel movies? Are they drinking the Kool-Aid, or is that part of their fun?
Oh yeah, they love it. They love all the cartoons and the movies. I didn't take them to see the newest Infinity War because I felt like they'd be devastated.
Sure. Oh, sure. But, yeah, especially watch Spider-Man crumble to dust. My God.
Well, I said, my wife kept saying, I think Oliver will be fine with it. And I said, I promise you he will not. Because he cries, he cried in Black Panther when he thought Black Panther was dead.
Wow, okay, sure.
And so I said, okay, we can ask him. You got to be subtle about it so you don't tell him what happens. And so she said, Oliver, would you be upset if we went to see a Marvel movie where a bunch of the characters die? And he looked up and he said, I hope Spider-Man doesn't die. And I was like, I looked at her, I was like, see, we are not going to that movie.
Well, when they both come out, you could show them both in a row. Don't worry, let me put the next disc in. Everything's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll be streaming, of course. That's great, man. Oh my God. Well, again, you don't know how that stuff is going to hit you. I completely understand. Like I said, my 9-year-old self with Gwen Stacy in the pages. It's just like, I'm like, oh my God. And it was shocking. It was exciting. Yeah, but it's even worse if the heroes die. You see, I grew up with the imaginary stories. They were all being reprinted, I think, when I was a kid. So they didn't upset, I watched Superman die. I watched Luthor, cheer when he killed Superman. Stuff like that. Too funny. Were you a What If kid? Did you enjoy What If?
Here and I didn't get, like I said, I didn't have very much access to comics. What happened was when I got into them, my dad then pulled out a box. He was like, "Oh yeah, I used to be really into that," and he pulled out like tons of boxes of comics from the attic that he could have given me at any time in my life.
That's great. Oh yeah, but that's so fantastic. So were they 60s comics? Were they 70s comics? Which?
Some 60s. Yeah, I mean, he would have been. Yeah, they're probably mostly 60s. I mean, he had Amazing Spider-Man number 19 is the most valuable one, but the cover was, falling off.
Well, he loved his comics. He like most of us. We read the hell out of them. Absolutely, man.
Yeah, but there's a ton of crazy stuff in there. But yeah, I'd read the What Ifs and I remember he had a lot of Green Lantern, and his favorite was Spider-Man also. So.
Oh, that's great. I was wondering if, as you've become more familiar with the Marvel Universe, are there any C or D level characters that you eventually would like to play with you even more. I don't even know which ones beyond the ones that we've discussed so far that you've had a chance to play with.
I'd have to think
Damian
about
Hellstrom or somebody like that.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I can't. I mean, I still want to do more with Wolverine someday, and I want to do something significant with Thor. But I haven't thought much about C&D list. I'd have to really rack my brain for that.
I understand. Man, your commissions, and I will call them sick, and I mean that in the best possible way. They're so good, man, and it's really a pleasure when you do post them on Instagram and Twitter. And
thanks.
Absolutely, man. Jesus. So I'm sure we're if we haven't already mentioned it, we're all going to be at Terrificon next month at Mohegan Sun in Connecticut, about a month away now. You and I are, we're both not at San Diego, of course, as we're recording this. Did you go last year?
No, I haven't been to San Diego. It's funny. I went for a bunch of years in a row before I had like a career, and then once I had a career, I was like, I can't be doing that anymore.
It's a time suck. It's a big time suck. I can, for you guys especially. I get it. And I kind of felt like I'd done the last 9 years. I'm like, I can take a year off. It's all right.
I tried this morning. I was like, I texted my editor and I said, I swear to you, if you will push the deadline back 1 week on this issue, I will show up at San Diego tomorrow. And he said, I can't do that.
I totally understand. Well, you will be busy, I'm sure, at your table at Terrificon, and that's why I bring up your commissions there. They really are. They're so great.
Thank you.
Absolutely, man. Do you put out a request list prior to a show and everything? And
I don't do the prior anymore because it was kind of, I felt like everybody would just get there and be mad at me because they didn't
make the cut or whatever.
Yeah, so I try to, I don't know, I might start doing, I'm going to try to find the most fair way to do it. And I also don't necessarily want to work super hard at a show.
I understand. I understand.
That's what I do. I work so much at home that I'm just like, when I go to a convention, I'd like to be able to spend a little, I want to sign for people and talk to people. I don't want to have my head down and have them just like looking at the top of my head while I'm trying to get through commissions. So, it's usually pretty limited, but I try to do like the 5-minute sketches and stuff.
I was going to ask if you've got like a
people get something.
Yeah, if you've broken down a style to do like a quick sketch or whatever.
Yeah, there's all kinds. I have all kinds of tiers because I would prefer just people to get something, and I'll even do free Sharpie head sketches and all that stuff just because I don't know. I want to interact. Like I like people. I like talking to people. I don't want to be, I don't want to have to like leave my table and go to my room and work.
Sure.
Because I feel like that's kind of not the point of being there. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to handle this stuff. Are
you going to gamble? I can't decide. I don't know how much time I'm going to spend in the actual casino or whatever. I am intrigued. I covered boxing for a long time, and Mohegan Sun is a boxing destination. A lot of big fights happen there. I never covered a fight there, so I am intrigued to see the place. Period.
I will be gambling my butt off. Charles Soule's going.
I know.
We spent a lot of time. We've probably spent, I don't know, 15 hours at blackjack tables together now. So
that's
we've already been conspiring to get to the blackjack tables. My wife will handle my show schedule a lot. Like she kind of helps me out with that stuff. And she's always very much like, you can't take any more shows. 6 is enough for this year. That type of thing. And we got this email, and I forwarded it to her thinking she's just going to kind of write it off. And then she called me, and she's like, she came down and talked to me, and she was like, Mohegan Sun is like one of the best casinos in the country. And I was like, oh, okay. And she's like, yeah, so we're definitely doing that one because she loves to gamble also. So
that's fantastic. Oh, that's fantastic.
You can invite her to Paris, and she's kind of like, but then you invite her to a nice casino, and she's all about it.
Have you guys done a lot of like Las Vegas comic shows or whatever?
Yeah, we there was a while there where we were going at least once a year. I think we're going to try to get back to that, but the kids are kind of at an age where it makes it a little difficult. But yeah, we love going to Vegas.
What's your favorite? You see now and again, because I'm spending 16 years covering boxing, I've spent a lot of time in Vegas. What's your favorite casinos?
Well, we love the Aria was really nice. We stayed there fairly recently. We stayed at
okay.
Yeah, it's kind of a newer one.
Okay.
Let's see. We've stayed at the Bellagio.
Sure. Beautiful. I always feel like James Bond when I'm in the Bellagio. Go on.
Yeah, that whole area is so interesting.
Gorgeous. Oh my God! Yeah. They have a legitimate art gallery in the Bellagio. It's fantastic.
Yeah, you kind of that's the weird thing about Vegas is you kind of end up in these places and you're like, well, I didn't know that this. Like we went one year to a convention, the Amazing Comic-Con Las Vegas, and we were at this like off the strip. It was not in the main area of Vegas. It was I forget what I forget what it's called, but we're at this hotel. It's kind of random. It's still a casino, so we're going to gamble like crazy. But then we're like, I want to go to a steakhouse. Let's look up the steakhouses in Vegas. Well, in that hotel, this sort of rinky-dink casino, it was like one of the best steakhouses in the United States.
There you go. Yeah,
and you just kind of find these random things, and it was an amazing restaurant. And it was awesome.
That's excellent. No, Rich Melman is a big Chicago restaurateur and has continued to evolve as the foodie scene has evolved. I mean, he goes back to the 70s, and even his father before him was a big 50s and 60s restaurateur. And they had the restaurants when the Paris was brand new. Mm-hmm. And it was fantastic. And yeah, I mean, and again, because of our Chicago connection, we got a nice deal, and he was a good guy to us and everything. But no, you're right, man, and it is fun. Or you discover that underground kind of Italian walkway that's under Caesars with the fake sky that within 2 hours or whatever you go from sunrise to sunset, and it's it's beautiful. I mean, no, it's funny, all those little areas that beyond the gambling and the entertainment and stuff. That there's a lot of fun things to do in Vegas. Like
my wife was going to Vegas with her family forever. But, like I was never a gambler. I was always sort of not into it, and she forced it on me, and now I'm a degenerate.
That's awesome. So you're a blackjack guy. See, I'm an OTB guy for two reasons. Yeah. One, I love, and it's a shame because I do know there's an element of cruelty involved. I love thoroughbred horse racing. I think it's amazing. It's so beautiful to watch. And so I can lose myself doing that. But also I love going to the sports book and just betting on a game and just sitting and, waitress refreshing your drink every, few minutes, and you're into a basketball game or a baseball game or whatever. And it's just like, all right, fine. I'm gambling with $50 for the next 3 hours. It's kind of fun. Yeah, that's okay.
A few years ago, I was in Vegas for baseball's opening day, and I was in heaven. I just sat there and watched like 15 games at the same time.
I do. We would my sports radio station. We would go down the first weekend of the NCAA basketball tournament.
Oh, that's
and
so
it's
cool.
The same thing. Oh, and it's there's nothing better because you got a bunch of alumni that are down there as well from each school, and they're cheering and everything. It's fun, and I mean, now it's funny because I think the availability of satellite television in your home and all the various packages, you kind of get jaded. But then again, I mean, you're just surrounded by all these giant monitors and nice plushy chairs, and it's just the sportsbook is a nice, comfortable place to gamble. So I'm thinking especially being a boxing guy too.
Yeah, I'm going to set up like 15 TVs in my house and start doing that.
This one sports radio host I used to work with, he had a giant house, and he built his basement into like a sports bar. And he had so cool. He really did have like 6 monitors hung up above this giant wet bar. And it really was. We'd go there for football Sundays and just spend the day there, and it was fantastic. So no, I mean, if you got the money to burn, why not? It's fun. It could be fun. That's great, man. No, I'm excited to go down there too. And actually, off the air, we were talking a bunch of I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the old timers there as well, and especially Joe GL is going to be there. And, he goes back to the 60s and stuff, and he was, inking like Carmine Infantino on the new Batman, the 60s Batman with the yellow emblem when that was first introduced and stuff like that.
Oh, my God. That's crazy.
So, I hope he's might be interested in doing a word balloon at some point. I'd love to talk to him, pick his brain. But, man, I was telling you, David Michelini's going to be there, the great Iron Man and Venom writer, and of course, wonderful Spider-Man writer on his own right, and Denny O'Neil was going to be there. Roy Thomas, Don McGregor, one of the great Black Panther writers, among other things. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. And then of course our friends, Celia and Norm, are going to be there. So Soul, like you said, it'd be good to see Charles. Too funny, man. No, it's going to be great. Are you doing any other shows this year?
What do I have scheduled? I can't remember. I don't think I've cut way back on shows. Like I said, this one somehow got through the cracks. I know how, because it's at the Mohegan Sun. But for the most part, I'm trying not to do. I with this Venom thing, we got them to try something new, which is that instead of they were going to do these 1.5 shipping, so it would be like 18 issues a year, and I wanted to do like old school, like I do almost all the issues. So what they did is they're only doing 12 issues a year, but then there's satellite titles. So there's like the Venom one was announced. I think there was a second one that was announced, but so they're going to do these satellite one shots, and then I get to do the main series. So I want to uphold my end of the bargain by staying home and working as much as possible, rather than
understood.
Because every time you try to do a show, every time I think, oh, I got this, I'll get all this stuff done before I go, and then I never do, and
I totally understand. Absolutely, man. Well, that's the thing. We want you to make. It's like you got to make the donuts. We want you to make the donuts. It's okay. Well, that's great. Well, I'm glad that Mohegan Sun is going to be the exception, and I'm going to see you there. Do you ever envision like going to DC and doing any DC stuff? Are there any DC heroes that intrigue you?
Oh yeah, for sure. We've talked, and it was definitely something that was on the table this time in my latest negotiation. But I'm pretty enamored with this Venom series, and it would have cut me off at the knees while I was doing that. So. We'll talk next time that my contract's up and see what's what. But it's a good time to be at Marvel. Good time to keep the momentum going. So
that's good, man. Well, they're lucky to have you, truly, because again, I think your interiors and your covers are spectacular. Your commissions are spectacular, and I'm glad everything's going well for you, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, and I look forward to seeing you next month at Mohegan Sun for Terrificon, and I might see you at the tables. I may not, but certainly I'll see you at the Artist Alley tables. And I think we're going to be on a Venom panel together. So that'll be fun.
Cool.
I'll be moderating that. So, very, very good, Ryan Stegman. It's a pleasure, and I'm always happy to see you, and I look forward to seeing you face to face. And when there's something new to talk about, whatever it is, come back and we'll do this again.
All right, for sure. Thank you.
There you go, Ryan Stegman, wrapping things up on today's Word Balloon. I hope you enjoyed it. Today it was brought to you again by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you very much, League, for your support. If you'd like to subscribe to Word Balloon and help the cause, you can go to patreon.com/Word Balloon. Word Balloon is also brought to you by InStock Trades at InStockTrades.com. Lots of the titles that Ryan Stegman mentioned are available at great prices at InStockTrades.com. You can get things like She-Hulk's trade paperback, The Hunt for Intelligentsia, Harrison Wilcox and Peter David doing the writing, Ryan Stegman and John Boy Myers doing the art, 42% off, $8.69. You can also get Spider-Man Return of Anti-Venom. This is a story written by Dan Slott and Christos Gage, Giuseppe Soli, and also Umberto Ramos and Ryan Stegman doing the art chores. 42% off, it's $9.27. Of course, the Superior Spider-Man run, My Own Worst Enemy, just when Doc Ock is taking over as Spider-Man. This was written by Dan and Slott, and of course it's Stegman and Giuseppe doing the artwork. 42% off, it's just $10.99. and 43 cents for Volume 1 of the Superior Spider-Man. There's Wolverine, trade paperback Book 1, 3 Months to Die, Paul Cornell doing the writing, Ryan Stegman doing the art, 42% off. It's just $14.49. And you could reach back for his Marvel Adventures work, Thor and Spider-Man together. It's Todd DeZago, Mark Sumarik, J.M. DeMatteis, and Tom DeFalco doing the writing. And listen to this lineup of art. Ron Lim, Ryan Stegman, Herb Trimpe, and Ron Friends. Pretty good stuff. 42% off, only $5.79. There's also Incredible Hulks, The Fall of the Hulks. This was Jeff Parker, Greg Pak, Fred Van Lente, Harrison Wilcox, and others doing the writing, and Paul Pelletier, Ariel Olivetti, Ryan Stegman among the artists involved with this trade paperback. It's 42% off, $23.19. It's all available to you at InStockTrades.com. Don't take my word for it. You can check it out for yourself. You'll find your favorite writers and artists at great prices at InStockTrades.com. Thanks again for listening to Word Balloon. Thank you very much for your continued support, and I really appreciate everybody, enjoying the show, because I've been getting a lot of positive emails and social media messages as well, how much they're really happy. And I got to tell you, man, it's all thanks to the great creators and creative people that come on Word Balloon and give me these incredible conversations. So can't thank the guests enough. They're the ones who really make the show. I'm just here directing traffic. So, both literally and figuratively, if you know my radio career. But I hope you've been enjoying the conversations. It's really been exceptional the last few weeks, and I've really been fortunate. And a lot of it has to do with Mitch Halleck at Terrificon and guys like John Cimino, again, Stretchy Hulk guy, as my buddy Art Baltasar refers to him. They're all going to be at Terrificon next month. And you're hearing the commercials. I'm going to be out there. I'm doing 2 panels with Roy. I'm going to do a Venom panel with Stegman, Black Panther panel, about 8 panels over the weekend at Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. My buddies Art and Franco are going to be there as well. My buddies Tim Seeley and Mike Norton are going to be there. Very, very excited about the lineup. I'm pumping this convention because, they're sponsoring me and they're helping me get out there. But it's a great show, just like Roy said. And it's a comic book show. It's a real comic book show. There's celebrities. The Fonz is going to be there. Daniel San, Karate Kid, is going to be there. Ralph Macchio. And I'm really excited about Sam Jones, Flash Gordon. Lots of great celebrities. Also, lots of great comic book people as well. So I hope you'll be able to join me if you're in the tri-state area of Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. I hope to see you at Terrificon next month. Regardless, lots more big Word Balloon guests coming that are going to be at Terrificon, and I'm happy to share with you some of these conversations. And very excited about some of the people that you're going to be hearing in the days and weeks ahead. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2018.